This program is brought to you by cable franchise fees and generous donations from viewers like you.
Going to call the Finance Committee for May 20, 2021 to order at 1 p.m. And thank everybody for being here yet again, since we're now in this rare time of year where we have twice a week meetings. And this meeting is being held by remote participation. Pursuant to Governor Baker's March 12, 2020 order suspending certain provisions of the open meeting law, General Law, Chapter 38, Section 18. And I'm going to, as we always do, check with each member of the committee to confirm that they're fully connected and can hear, and that we can hear them. And then I will proceed with today's agenda, which is the budget review, focusing on general government. So Bob Hegner.
I'm here.
And Kathy Shane.
Here.
And Griesberg.
Present.
Pat Angelis.
Present.
Bernie Kubiak.
Present.
Dorothy Pam.
Here.
And Jane Scheffler.
Here.
Okay, and so we know what the agenda is focusing on today, and I want to then ask Sean if you have a recommendation on the order that we are going to look at the sections of the budget.
Yeah, thank you, Andy. So the council/town manager will go first. I'm just keeping an eye on, I know Paul is going to hop on any minute now. And then the finance office, and with the finance office, we're going to cover debt assessments and Opeb as well. And then we're going to do human resources and employee benefits, information technology, town clerk, elections and registrations, and then facilities management. And people, I've gave them sort of rough times when to join on, so you'll see people join on throughout the meeting. So the first one would be the town council and town manager. However, the star of the show is not here for that. So we can either wait a couple minutes, or we can skip and go to finance, or we could do IT since I see Sean Hannon is here. Sean, are you there?
Otherwise, the
Yes.
only other thing you can do is split up finance into sections.
Yeah, I'm thinking maybe since Sean's here, if you're okay with maybe doing IT first, and that way he could get out of here.
Absolutely. Get no objections. No objection from me.
Are there any questions that you had received in advance, Sean, on that?
Not for IT. I do have some questions that I'll bring up when different departments come up that Jane sent in, but I don't see anything for IT. So Sean, do you just want to give a sort of a brief overview of the IT department?
Yeah, that'd be great. So very busy year in terms of personnel from last time we met. I don't think there have been any changes. We had Serge Fedorowski, who started about a year and a half ago, so he would have been here for the last time we went through the budget process. So no real changes in terms of personnel. We had a busy, different year last year. I don't know how much need to get into that, but deploying a lot of laptops, webcams, getting everybody set up to work remotely, meet remotely, transitioning back to working in person. Out of that, upgrading Wi-Fi in some town buildings. We started that, and we're we're finishing that off. Got a fairly large phone project going on now. We're in the process of replacing our existing phone system that's been upgraded, but the core of it's about 15 years old, so it's time to replace that. So we're in process of that. We've got the fiber optic cable being installed to replace the iNet. That's well on its way. It's taking longer than we were told, longer than we expected, but it's moving along. Along with that, we've got some network changes that once that's operational, we need to make some network changes. So get through our budget book. We're continuing the cybersecurity awareness training that we've rolled out to all employees, including town councilors. This year, we've also included through the state grant, we've included school department employees who use our financial system. Sean's idea, and it made sense. We're able to do it essentially for free under the grant. That's major projects. In terms of our budget, nothing huge in terms of changes, salary increases, and you can see in the budget the biggest increase is continuing the software maintenance that most of the packages we use go up on an average of 5% a year. We've also, many of the products we use have switched to more of a subscription model, as I imagine most of you have seen personally, and that their maintenance costs that we pay annually that are greater. I think that's pretty much it. I don't know.
Yeah,
Other
and
questions?
maybe I'll add real quick. As you can all imagine, Sean and his team have been, one of, if not the sort of most integral members of town hall during all this in terms of not only converting public meetings to remote, but also getting everybody the technology they need, training them how to use the technology, getting it, getting it set up in the office is one thing, but to get it set up in somebody's home is probably a bigger challenge that Sean can tell you about. And so they've been great at really getting everybody what they need throughout town so that we can continue to work and continue to be productive. And I haven't, there really were not huge productivity losses through the pandemic, and a lot of that is thanks to the work Sean did. And he's got the same name as me, so I really appreciate that.
Yeah, and spell it correctly.
Yeah.
So let me see if anybody else has questions. I was going to ask a few along the lines of what was just said, but let me get to the get my participant list up so I can see that there are 3 people who have hands raised right now. So I'm going to start with recognizing people whose hands are up, and Dorothy Pam.
I have just recently completed the security training at Holyoke Community College, and I printed out the certificate, but I truthfully would be unable. I don't know how to go back and even find it to send you it by electronically. Can I mail you my certificate so I don't have to take the course again?
Yeah, I would imagine it's the same. It's probably the exact same training because the state has funded it. So if you've done it, I'll take your word for it. There's I'll see if we can check that off in the system.
I mean, to be honest, I learned only 2 things. Don't plug a little device that you find into your computer, and don't pay your medical bills with a credit card. That was it, but it took hours and hours.
Yeah. I guess the other thing I would add is don't hesitate to ask us if something looks suspicious.
Right.
We're happy to help.
Right. That was the answer to most questions. Ask your team. Right. I got that.
Kathy?
Yeah, I'll start with, you said INET is taking longer than expected. Are you budgeted in a way that you're fine dollar-wise on it? Does that mean, so I'm basically, will it come in at or under budget? It's just taking longer.
Yeah, as far as I know right now, the delays are not, they're not adding costs to the project. Where they do add costs is we do, our use of the INET expired through Comcast, so we are paying monthly for that. And I believe that's being paid for by CARES money, but Sean could answer that.
Yeah, so we saw authorization from the state to use CARES money for that because the original delay was in part caused by COVID, and some of the factories that produced the fiber, and they were supposed to get started sooner than they did. So we've been able to charge that because it was an unbudgeted cost. We thought we were going to have the fiber in much sooner. So far that there has been additional cost, but it's been covered through CARES.
Okay, so I just have another one related to INET and broadband. I saw on page 8 of this very long report that the town is anticipating getting $10 million in American Recovery Act dollars. And one of the uses is broadband infrastructure. So my question was, can the IT department tap into that at all? Does it potentially enable us to go even further than you were already planning? Anything with our affordable housing, large apartment complexes or senior centers where we could bring it. So I don't know how much you would get involved if that money is available. Would you get involved in making some decisions about that use of broadband?
Yeah, so
No, go
Jeff,
ahead.
I'm
Why
gonna-
don't you start,
Yeah.
Sean?
So what I can tell you about the fiber that's going up there, for the most part, it's up there and in the ground, is installed for municipal use only under agreements that we have with the utility companies. So we have the right to go on the poles and in the conduits because we're using the fiber for municipal use. We can, if the town chose to, the town could license the pole attachments, basically license to have the fiber up there and use it for that purpose in the future. There's a cost to that, and then there obviously be a cost to expanding it and connecting non-municipal buildings. So the short answer is yes, absolutely. What we're putting up there has the capacity and could be used for something else. It's just we would need to license it, and then we would also need to something would need to be put into place to provide service on it and support it and everything else, which is an undertaking.
So does that mean,
Sean,
Sean, you jump?
let
Okay.
Sorry, I just wanted to add.
Sean finish up.
Yeah, that's Sean Hannon or the Sean.
No,
or Sean?
yeah.
Okay.
I'm also,
Sorry, Sean.
Yes, John, no.
So that's an eligible use we're looking at closely. There's more details out, but there's still not sort of all the details out. What I've read so far about that particular eligible use, you can do it where broadband or high-speed internet doesn't exist. You can use the ARPA funds to put it in, which I'm not sure if that would apply in Amherst, because I think it exists there even if it's not municipal internet. It would there's options for other forms of it. So it's unclear whether we could use it for that because it already exists in one form or fashion. I think that eligible use was more about building it out in sort of more rural areas where there is no fiber at all. But not to say that that's a definite. So we're gonna look at that more and see if there's any possibilities there.
So I would see if Paul has anything to say on this, and then go back to Kathy. So Kathy, I'm not losing you.
Thank you.
Paul,
So
did you have something you wanted to add?
I did. So along these lines, if you need to set up a municipal utility to implement a program like this. You can't just offer it. You need to have a utility, have a revenue stream, and it's a legal process. It takes time. It takes 2 votes of the town council, and I think even a vote of the people to set up a utility to do this. So Northampton is looking at this now. It's probably something that the town might be interested in looking at. But it's not just something that we can just run a line down to folks. It's a pretty elaborate process.
I
You
think,
have to get a municipal power light company or something like that. Kathy?
okay, I think that answers what was going to be my follow-up question. So that the ARPA money, the recovery money might not even be able to be tapped into, but it certainly wouldn't do if what Sean said, we have to do an ongoing cost if we want to use it. So it wouldn't pay for the operating costs very long. So I got the answer I was looking for. Thank
Yeah.
you.
And again, it's not definite that it can't. It's just what I've read so far. So
Anything else, Kathy?
No, I'm done. I do want to say that I think you guys have been fabulous. With both all the Zoom meetings we're doing, but then you regularly, when I say I can't find the recording, you go, oh, someone wants to see it. You get it to us right away. You know, if we're looking at it because we're doing minutes or someone is asked to see it, and your team has just been amazing. So thank you.
Thank you. I'm lucky to have the team that I do. Makes my life easy.
Lynn?
Yes, let me also add my thanks to everything you've done this year, particularly at the point in time where all of a sudden during the security test, I got set up as one of the scam emails. And so all of a sudden I was getting these emails from people. Did you really want me to send you a credit card number? Whatever. So thanks for that, Sean. I talked to Sean and he said, oh yeah, we didn't realize when we set this up that you could be one of the random people. Well, I was. So much more importantly, for all the amazing other stuff you've done this year. I do have a question, and it pertains to software as it is adopted or adapted by other departments and the extent to which IT gets involved in that. So for example, we're putting in a new piece of software where we can collect fees for something. Do you get involved in the actual selection of the software? Are you basically depending on the expertise of the department because of their professional affiliations to know kind of what's out there? And how does that work?
Yeah, so we pretty much always get involved. Usually it's kind of through the budget process and the requests come through there first, but that we get involved there, and depending on the department and what they some departments already have something in mind. We work with the department to evaluate the software, make sure it's a good fit. Like Warner works a lot on that, and make sure that if it's new ambulance billing software, make sure that it works with the collectors, and the permitting software is a good example just because that touches so many different departments, and make sure just because it's perfect for inspections, make sure it's still a good fit for DPW and fire and everybody else and collectors who all use this. So yeah, IT gets involved in that, working with the department to find software that's appropriate and sustainable in terms of cost.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So I'll ask one question, and I see Bob Hagner's hand is up too, so I'll get to Bob in a second. I think that we've spoiled ourselves and spoiled our community a lot through having all of our meetings on Zoom, because our meetings have actually been more accessible to the public. And as Kathy pointed out, available to us to use for other purposes. And we're now going to be in the next fiscal year, or even the end of this fiscal year, starting to transition back to in-person meetings. Are we still at the point where the town room is the only room that can be used for recording meetings, or have we been able to follow through with the plans to expand that capacity?
Yeah, and so Paul may want to add to this, but what I can say is the town room currently is the only room that we can support recording the meetings, but more importantly, it's the only room that we really have equipped to support what we're kind of calling hybrid meetings, if they do happen, kind of meetings where some participants are remote, as well as in person, as well as the public participating remotely and in person. So the town room is currently the only room that's equipped to do that. But with the changes coming June 15th, we certainly can look into what it would cost to equip other rooms to start recording and or support hybrid meetings.
Yeah, Paul?
So June 15th is the reason we're able to meet like we do here through Zoom is because the governor has a state of emergency declared, and there are executive orders that permit this way of meeting. That expires on June 15th unless they extend it or something like that, which means we go back to our old way of doing things, which means you meet in person in the designated room, and certain meetings are recorded and others are not. And so I think that is something we're prepared for. I don't know if the public and the committees are prepared for. And so we have looked at this hybrid, and Sean and his team have done some pretty extensive work on what a hybrid meeting looks like. And it basically is a Zoom meeting with people sitting in the same room together with your laptops in front of you. The council is the only committee that has town issued laptops, so it's not really transferable to other committees. And it takes some technical support to run those meetings, which we are obviously going to devote to the council and its committees, but don't have the capacity to offer that to every committee out there, because there are dozens of meetings a week. So right now it's unless we have, and also in order for someone to participate remotely, we have a remote participation process where you have to submit in advance that you want to participate remotely, and you can participate, I think, in 5 per year or 4 in a row, something like that. There's certain rules. So unless the state changes that, and we're hoping they change it, at least they keep it as we are now, at least until Labor Day, we will be back in person under the normal circumstances as we have in the past, come at least by Labor Day. But right now we're prepared for June 15th.
Thank you, Bob.
Yeah, I just had a couple of questions. The first, you mentioned that you were in the process of upgrading the phone system. And I'm wondering kind of what we're targeting for that, because the company I work for, eventually they started out with copper lines, and then they went to IP phones, and then they basically threw out the phones altogether and just went through Zoom or other applications on our laptops. And so that's one question, is the town set up to do that? The second question I have is, on the town computers, are there strict security protocols? Again, the company I used to work for a long time, I had admin rights on my own computer, and eventually they took that away from everybody. So I couldn't even download a printer driver. I had to go through the IT department to do that. And it stopped a lot of problems. So just if you could elaborate on those. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. So in the phone system, what we are going to, or say what we're going from, we currently have a Cisco VoIP system. So it is network based, but we're relying on kind of, I don't want to say old fashioned, but these PRIs through Verizon that are 30+ year old technology. Essentially they're T1s. that we're having a lot of call quality problems with. So we're moving off that. We're moving off the Cisco system. We're moving to a different VoIP system, voice over IP network system. But it's primarily handset based. So for our users and for supporting our users, it's primarily, what you would consider a conventional office phone, but it does support running a client either on a mobile device or on a laptop. In fact, health department, we've been working a lot with them just with the changes with hotlines and everything that they've wanted set up for COVID and people coming and going and people working from home. Most of the users in the health department have gone to just basically the PC based client. So they use a laptop and the headphones, and they're pretty happy with it, and it works well for them. For the bulk of our users, in terms of making the transition as easy as possible, we're going with conventional handsets, but it gives us a lot of flexibility going forward in disasters, people working remotely, and that kind of stuff. In terms of security of our computers, we changed it over the years, but we're trying to strike a balance between restricting what people can do and making sure they can still use the computers. So we do lock things down. Some they do require admin credentials, and I think the counselors have probably experienced this trying to install stuff on their laptops previously. So there are, by default, no users get admin credentials. The other thing that I think has really helped us between user education and we use Office 365 for our email, and that does a pretty good job of stripping out malicious links, blocking a lot of stuff. It's not perfect by any means, but it does a pretty good job of helping filter out some of the garbage so it doesn't get through.
Yeah, thanks. It just personally, it was very irritating not to be able to install a driver, but
yeah,
it really did help with system security.
Yeah. I think it's helped us.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Kathy, did you have anything else?
Yeah, I was just going to say that your team, it's actually in a previous place I worked, they did too. Bob, when you get totally frustrated, they from their headquarters log on to your computer and do what you want. So it's labor intensive for Sean and his team, but they get me that driver that, I can't install my printer without, so so I didn't have to. At first I thought I had to bring the machine, the laptop down. And so it was a quick-ish fix, but it was labor intensive.
Right. And that's why we have such problems with Windows systems, is that anyone with admin rights can get into your computer. So.
Yeah.
Okay, anything else in the way of questions? Because I think appreciate all of the great work you're doing, and it seems that we know you've been clear about the challenges ahead, and understand that the software costs is because that big behemoth industry is interested in their profits, and they're getting them from us.
Absolutely.
Anything else from the committee? Okay, so Mr. Hammond, thank you.
Thank you everybody for your support.
So we want to go back and go to council and town manager office, Sean.
Yeah, so Paul, you're up next. So there were a few questions, but I'll let Paul do sort of an overview of the council and the manager's budget, department budget, and then I'll go to the questions.
So thank you. So our budget is pretty straightforward. we have we have 25% of the clerk of the council, 75% of that position is under the council. Our staffing is the same. We have an administrative assistant at 50% of the time. And the communications manager is moved into the budget at 75% of the time, with 1 foot still in IT, and then the assistant to the town manager as well. The questions that folks had were about whether there's been a lot of turnover or not. Are we doing questions now, Sean?
Yeah, you can go right into questions if you want to
okay.
go through them.
Yeah. So there has been some turnover. Half of the turnover seems to be about, especially at the department head level, is due to retirements. We have the health director was retirement. The human resources director and the town clerk both moved on to other opportunities. The finance director was filled after a long vacancy, which I think we're all happy with. It was worth the wait. And so, it is something we're paying attention to in terms of what does that mean when there is turnover? Does that reflect anything in our organization? It's something the new HR director and I have talked about in terms of doing a third-party assessment of our operations to see if there's any indicators there in terms of turnover. And we are seeing that there's a fair amount of turnover throughout the organization. The economy is such that people are taking advantage, making different life choices, and also have additional opportunities out there. And we're noticing sometimes our pay structure isn't as competitive in certain areas, especially areas that require licenses, as we are in other places. In terms of the question was about the $80,000. So last year we put in $80,000 to address systemic racism because that was early in the process, and we wanted to allocate funds to have available for that. The funds, $12,000, I think it was roughly that, was given as stipends to the members of the Community Safety Working Group. Each was given a $1,000 stipend because we recognize for this group in particular, we were asking them to do a lot of intense personal sometimes work and they have really delivered on that work. So it's a small stipend, but it's just in recognition of the kind of commitment and the intensity of the work over a short period of time that we were asking them to do. The bulk of the funds went to a consultant who produced a report that the council has received called 7Gen Movement Collective. And that's a local company that has produced the report on the police department and community safety in general. We have about $12,000 left. Half of that funds is being offered for training through our core equity team, and the other half I've had discussions with the reparations group, understanding there's some restrictions in terms of procurement, but seeking, I've asked them if there are things that we can support their efforts on along these lines, and they're looking into that right now. And so I'm open to any questions.
Hey, Kathy? You're muted.
I sure am. Staying on the 80,000, I see it's in the coming year budget also, and it looks like I had to look at two different places, but you're augmenting it with, the plan is to augment it with another 30,000 from ARPA. And is the intention that, so I'm at 80 and 30 and getting 110, is that your plan? Is that going to be a permanent part? Do you see it an ongoing part of the budget? And if the answer is yes, toward what purpose, what function, what are you thinking about?
So we have a lot of work to do in this area, and we needed to start carving out funding to address many of the things that we have to do in terms of as we start to roll out system or organization-wide training. And for all of our staff, it's going to take time. It's going to take multiple years. And so we want to be able to have funds available to that. And as you know, we're creating the DEI coordinator role, and there are going to be expenses that go along with that, because part of that role is to both work with our existing staff, talk about recruitment and retention. And both of those things are important functions for us, because we can put a lot of effort into recruitment, and if we're not able to hold on to folks because of our work environment, we need to understand what that is. So there is going to be some recruitment expenses that we're trying to be more proactive on, and not just sort of putting ads in the paper, but reaching out to people individually. And I think we have the right person who's going to be helping us with that. So yes, it is not designated for specific things right now, other than some of it. I know our core equity team, I really want to support our homegrown core equity team that's really working on these issues, and want to give them the resources they need to carry that out. And they're in the, like, their proposal is for next year is in the $30,000 to $40,000 range.
So I think what I heard you say, then you're not thinking that you would actually hire a specific person. You're going to be using it in a similar flexible way that you've been using this year's money for multiple, it can be drawn on in multiple ways. Would that be a fair way of?
Yeah, we want to be responsive to needs as they come up and opportunities.
Okay, thank you.
Pat?
Thank you. I want to stay, you said that the part of the 80,000 this year would be for the DEI coordinator. Is that accurate?
No, when you say this year, you mean
30,000?
Are you talking about
FY 22? Yeah, sorry.
22?
Yes.
So it would be to support, it's not to fund the DEI coordinator position, but to provide support for the work that they're doing.
Gotcha. Here's my question then. And it's a question for the original 80,000 in FY 21. I would like to see, as a council member and as a member of finance, a detailed reporting about how that money is spent, has been spent, or projections for this next year. And I would really like to have that. The other thing is, when I heard that you were going to do something, funding for the DEI, are there other places in the budget where there's money tucked away in a lump that you are actually as going towards the DEI or the Multicultural Center or any of those other issues? And our knowing those things would be very helpful. So.
Yeah, you tuned out a little bit there for a second, but what I heard is that you want to report on this, on the current spending for the existing FY 21 80,000, and I can update that for you. I think I sent one back maybe a month ago, but I can update that with the more recent information, which I'm happy to do. In terms of the allocation for the FY 22 funds, I can put that out, lay that in a little more detail from what we know at this moment in time.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
And well, the other part of the question was, it sounds like you have earmarked some money to help support the DEI. So to me, that's sort of tucked into this figure. So are there other places in the budget where you've tucked money away to address some of the community safety working groups' concerns and issues in the FY 22 budget in the same way, where it may be part of a lump sum, but you're thinking about?
So, I mean, Sean can weigh in on the ARPA money. So that's one of the paths that we're.
That's the 30,000.
Yeah, do you want me to add to that, Paul?
Yeah, please.
So the DEI coordinator position, again, there is a existing part-time position, 50, it's not a part-time person, but it's a split position,
Right.
50% position that's in the general fund budget. We are going to combine $30,000, or proposing to combine that position with $30,000 of the ARPA money to create a full-time DEI coordinator position, who would then help, direct how the $80,000 or guide some of the activities that the $80,000 would go towards. So that's separate from the 80.
Yes.
And then, the human resources budget in general, you'll be talking with the human resources director in a little bit. I'm sure there are also some of her funds that will also support some of these initiatives, and we can ask those questions in a little bit when she comes up.
Yeah, thank you, Sean and Paul. It seems to me that having more access to this information would be helpful to address some of the concerns that we're hearing from the community, across the community.
Mhm.
The other thing is, and this is a more possibly uncomfortable question, we lost our town clerk to a better position. We lost our human rights director to a better position. But it's interesting to me that one of them was a Black woman and one of them was a Latina woman. And I am concerned for some of the things that I've heard through the grapevine about some interactions that were not comfortable for one of the women in particular. So I guess I'm trying to figure out how much is it possible that our lack of understanding, or I don't even know how you say it, have we driven some people of color out of this community? And I am concerned. I know this is a tender topic, but I am really concerned about it.
Yeah, no, I totally
So-
agree, Pat. Yeah, I agree. And I mean, we put a lot of effort into recruiting strong people into these pivotal, these important positions. And then that's why I talked about retention as an important function, and also external look at how, and is it something I am doing? Is this something our organization is doing? Why, or is it just happens? Is it just that people hit two opportunities and they chose? But it's because what you just identified is significant. I feel we need to investigate that and look into it.
Thank you. And it's painful and uncomfortable for all of us,
But
yeah. I
But
think
it's clear that's not something we want to have happen. And it could be that people made life choices or for career.
that's what I'm hoping.
But we need to understand that, and
Yeah.
that's one of the things we had talked about.
Yeah. Thank you very much, Paul.
Dorothy?
I am still not sure what our way forward is in terms of the issues we've just been discussing. For example, spending a lot of money on training is what people are doing. I personally don't think it has much efficacy. I do think a clear statement, that an institutional statement that certain kinds of behavior will not be tolerated, and real response, because it's not so much the institution, it's the people in the institution that cause the bad situations that drive away people that you have spent a lot of time and money hiring. But I also want to know is, we were asked, the Finance Committee, to come up with a clear revenue stream for the Reparations Committee. And I want to just say, I think we cannot go on as usual. The aim has been to be organized, intelligent, efficient, planning, doing it right. And that, that's been really going great, all right? But sometimes the system has to respond out of its comfort level. And we've had 4 different actions. I think it's 4. I mean, life is very confusing right now, going on where people have organized, protested, and said, wait, please listen to me. We're supposed to have a role in this government. And if all of them are not fulfilled, if all of them are beaten back, then the institution, you can say, oh, we're strong, we withstood it, we did great. But then what happens is the public says, forget it. I have no interest in it. I'm not showing up. I'm not going to listen to meetings. I'm not going to do anything. They can do whatever they want. Okay. I don't care. And, you can run it. A town runs easier that way, but it's not very democratic. And I just think we have to. So where are we going to respond? All right. It's not going to be on the moratorium, the way things look. I don't believe that voter veto is going to win. I think we're going to pursue with the library. We will go forward on the 4 capital projects. But I do think that, I think Paul is working with the Community Safety Working Group, and at some point we will have a rebalanced, I hope, police social service budget response team. I believe we will get that in time. So that leaves reparations. And I just feel that we're at the time right now when that's something we can't just say, well, we've done a budget, we've done it great, we've done it, all our stuff. That'll mess up our planning. I think we have to mess up our planning. I think we have to come up with something. And, I don't have the suggestions on that. You are the experts. But I'm just saying, I think we have to do it.
Yep. So I think three things there, Dorothy. First off, I disagree with you on the training. I think training matters. I felt the training that I went through with the council for those 3 weekend days was really pivotal for me. I think that kind of work has to be done at the employee level because it's about learning and creating a space to have dialogue with each other. So I think that's really important, and that's what I really want to. And I think our core equity team is doing that, and we're sort of utilizing homegrown talent to help us move in that direction. We just had one last week, and the employees were emailing back saying what a terrific experience it was. So we're moving forward. I think that is important for us as an organization and as a community. In terms of the how are we responding? You know, I've really appreciated the Community Safety Working Group report. If you have not read it, I encourage you to read it. I think it's really a good document. We have been working we've met a couple times this week to review that document and start to put together some numbers to help on the implementation. What's it look like to get this plan into action? And we are, hopefully have something for you a week from today, to be able to have a timeline and dollars associated with it. So it starts to look like, people can see there's action. Assuming the council wants to create this department, that's sort of an important thing. If it's creating a new department, it actually requires a vote of the town council under the town charter. In terms of reparations, that you just had that handed to you on Monday, and it's a referral to the finance committee. We've, Sean and Sonia and I have had some thoughts along those lines, but I mean, that's a pretty big discussion to have and understand what's the purpose and how are you going to allocate it. So I think that's a significant conversation for the council to have and the public too, to weigh in as well.
If I could respond just briefly, but we've seen reparations coming for 2 years. Remember, you had town staff delivered us that book at the very beginning of our tenure. I'm glad to hear that the core equity training is good. Perhaps we should have some. That's not what we got.
Bernie?
Yeah, just maybe I missed it, but I've been looking for a copy of the final report from the community services group. I've read through what's on their website, their page on the website. So that's still in draft form. It's an interesting document. The community response stuff is something I very, very much favor for a variety of reasons. But that report falls short in a number of ways, which we may hear about in the future, and some of that may be corrected. So I'd really appreciate getting a copy of that final document. And they also made reference to yet another document that's going to be available on June 30th. So I'm not sure what we're quite missing, or I'm quite missing.
I'll send it to you, and I'm just seeing if it's on their website yet or not, but I know Jennifer's going to post that.
We got it Monday night, so I was also thinking that Sean might want to go ahead and post it in the 27th meeting, so it's there, as well as send it to us, but we know that's something we're going to be talking off of, so just get it in the right place. It's not always easy. When we have the kind of meeting we had Monday night, it's not always easy to find the document you're looking for. There were a lot.
Okay.
Yeah, and just the resident members don't always get any of this information, so it would be helpful for us to get whatever is sent to the council.
Yeah,
I try to do my best that I can with that because the SharePoint program is a limited access database to try and pull out the stuff that doesn't end up in the public packet and make sure that it gets to you, or at least that you're aware of it if it's related to the committee work. But I think that this last week has been sort of over the top, is moving in a very fast pace on several different topics. And Dorothy brought up the subject that we were asked as a finance committee to report on something, think about something and report back. And having to do with reparations and identifying potential revenue streams. And we do need to get that into an agenda. And Sean and I have been talking about that so that it gets placed into an agenda and it becomes publicly available information that we're talking about it for the reasons that open meeting law. Kathy, your hand is up. I didn't know if it was up.
No, it is. I'm going to switch and ask just a pretty simple question that's not related to this. So I just want to make sure no one else has their hand up to stay on this topic.
No one else has their hand up now.
Okay, so my memory of last year is that I could see somewhere what we had budgeted for legal expenses. So I'm just wondering, is that under general government? Can I see that somewhere? And it's purely a question, not that I want to know what it is, but can I find it, was my question.
So that to Sonia or Sean?
That is a good question. I can't remember if it's broken out separately.
It used to be a separate section of the budget book, but we combined it with general services along with the audit and all the other outside contract type things we did. So it's in that line item. And it's separate on it. You can see it. I separated out still in the quarterly report. So.
Okay.
And what we could do, Kathy, is maybe add it to the next budget document. I'll make a note that maybe we break that out somehow, because I know that's a question that's asked frequently by different people. So we could list it.
Okay. I think that was it when I'm on general. I just was kind of trying to figure out where it was. And my others, once we go to general, I have some questions when we get to benefits and some of the other pieces that we're working through.
Andy, there were two other questions. You mind if I just read them off real quick?
Go
I
ahead.
think they're simple ones. The first one, these are both town council related. How are stipends for the council set? And I believe that's charter, right?
Yeah, I can address that. So section 10.7R of the charter sets the initial stipends for the council and the school committee. So that was set by charter, and there's a process for changing that. And it's section 2.4, which has a process. If the council wants to change it, there's a process, and you can't just change it automatically. It takes a little bit. It takes some time to do it.
And then the next question, similar to that, was we added funds to the council's section for school committee stipends, and the question was sort of like how we came to the number, because it's only for 4 stipends and not for 5. And that's because one of the members right now isn't eligible for the stipend. So there's only 4 budgeted, but it's correct to point out that we would have to increase that in the future.
So the 5th member is an employee of the school district, and you can't take 2 salaries. You have to choose which one you want to take.
And I think that's it there's a couple other questions that I was going to raise at different points throughout the meeting today that aren't related specifically to this section.
Anything else on town manager, town council? Seeing none, Sean, guide us forward.
All right. So the next section is finance. And so I'm going to do a very brief overview of the whole group. And we have Sonia Aldrich, our comptroller, and Jennifer LaFountain, our collector, Sherry Boucher, our treasurer, and Elizabeth Duffy, our assessor, who are here to answer any questions you might have on these sections. But I'm going to do a very brief overview of all of them just in the sake of time, so move us forward. So the finance office globally is responsible for the overall financial health of the town. And FY21, our major projects, we're working on the budget document, navigating all of the COVID grants, planning around the 4 building projects, and making some progress on reviewing our financial policies and our Opeb funding plan. For FY22, some of the things we're going to be taking a look at are implementing improvements to the parking system, looking at our procedure manuals and modernizing those a little bit. And we'll have more COVID grants to manage going forward as well. The accounting department, we're primarily responsible for tracking all the financial activity and led by our rock, Sonia. In FY21, did a lot of work around improving our procurement system, streamlining processes with human resources and payroll. And a big challenge was planning for the retirement of 2 key staff. We have 2 longtime employees are either retired already or planning to retire just after the fiscal year ends. And so a lot of work has gone into preparing for their replacements. And in FY22, accounting is going to be looking at ways to continue improving our payroll and accounts payable processes. On the treasurer side, Sherry Boucher, she's responsible for managing all of the town's funds. And I want to take a minute to acknowledge all of Sherry's work. Sherry is retiring in September, maybe October, if I can convince her to stay a little bit longer. She's been with the town over 30 years. She is a meticulous manager of the town's money and has done an amazing job. She's stepped into roles when she's had to and done a great job. And this has been a busy year. I'll talk more about what she's done in a second. But Sherry, do you want to take a second and say anything? And does anybody want to thank Sherry for all her work?
I just want to thank the town itself for keeping me all these years. I've always enjoyed my job, the people, the public especially. I always enjoyed helping everyone, whether it's getting them a tax bill or helping them figure out how to pay it. So I just want to say thank you for all the years. It's been a long haul.
We thank you for all of the years and the long haul and the amazing amount of work you've done and how well you have managed our funds. And thank you.
Thank you.
I just want to jump on here too, because Sherry is one of those people who, when I first started, she's always been the person who's been knew what the deal was, especially on the first floor, right? People confide in her, and she knows what reality is and can set you straight when you need to be set straight. And but her integrity, I think, is the thing that's most not remarkable. It's just who she is, and it's the thing that we most value about her in terms of just her friendship and everything. But just she has, Sean said something about how she follows every dime of the town relentlessly. And you should actually talk about, I think, her most recent accomplishment, which is the latest bond rates that we just got.
Yeah,
which is pretty.
One of the big projects that Sherry helped lead is we just went out for a big, we just did our first bond in 5 years, which is a lot more work than just doing a short-term borrowing. And there's a lot of documents that have to be pulled together and a tight timeline. And Sherry and Sonia really did a great job under very condensed schedule, getting all that together.
And the rates.
And our rates are amazing rates. We have a 10-year bond for $5 million, and the rate is about 1.07%.
Mm-hmm.
And we did a $2 million short-term borrowing, and the rate was about 0.33%. Probably 2 of the lowest interest rates we've ever had, would be my guess. And so, yeah, it's going to be a very difficult thing to replace Sherry. She's been amazing at training other people. That's another thing she's really great at, is cross-training and teaching other people what she does. And she has very good notes about what she does. We joke around some of the notes that we found. I won't bring up one about Google that came up that came up a little while ago. But let's just say that Google became a thing while Sherry was doing all this work, and so Sherry's just, we're going to miss her tremendously, and we're lucky that we've had her. So I'll keep going, and
I think Lynn, I don't know, Lynn, did you have
want to say something?
Yeah, unmute though.
Thank you. So Sherry, thank you so much. You've been amazing. I understand you're the person to go to when you want to know where the dead bodies are buried. So please make sure that you let Sean know all of that back information. More importantly, having just retired myself 3 years ago, could I advise you don't run for local government? It's not retirement. But thank you so much for your many, many years of service. I understand you're one of our longest term employees. 35 years is a long time. And we really wish you the best, and hopefully we might even get to see you in person before you walk out the door.
Thank you.
Great.
All right, I will keep moving on. The next office is the collector's office, which is led by Jen LaFountain, responsible for working the counter, receiving all the bill payments, property taxes, all those things that come into the town, all the revenues of the town go through Jen's office. So the high focus on customer service and making people feel welcome when they come in and when they talk to them on the phone. And FY21 projects included, primary project was putting a lot of our ways of paying bills online so that work could continue to be done remotely. And the collector's office was played a major role in reviewing all of our fees. We did a fee review comparing to other towns and getting all our fees in one place. And they led a lot of that. And for FY22, we're going to be taking a look at some of our longstanding ambulance billing agreements and the methodologies and how that works, and also our cannabis agreements, and getting all those things up to date as much as possible. And then the final department within finance is the assessor's office, led by Elizabeth Duffy. And the assessor's office does all the appraisal of properties in town, gathering all the data, helping establish the tax rate, getting money for the town, is a major function of that office. In FY21, she helped streamline some of our processes to make the data flow between our software databases without sort of the manual entry of it. It kind of comes in automatically now, which is great. And she did a lot of work on the residential exemption study. And for FY22, we're going to hopefully finalize the residential exemption study and bring information back to the council. We'll be introducing the PACE program to you at some point during FY22, which is a financing mechanism for sustainable improvements for commercial properties and multifamily properties. And another thing Liz and I have talked about a lot is how do we improve communication to residents about the different programs that are available to them, ones that may be struggling financially or whatever it may be. There's different exemptions that are out there, and how do we improve the way we communicate to people so they're aware of these things. And that's about it for the finance office. So I will turn it back to you all for questions, and we're all ready to answer them.
Kathy.
I'm going to start with the last thing you said, and I'm glad to hear that Liz is trying to figure out how would be easier for people to know what they could get and where to apply. Because I heard a discussion also for the Community Preservation Act that you can apply. And one of the points they made is you can't assume that if you got it one year that you've got it for the next year. You have to know to reapply. And so, if you're doing the real estate property taxes or the other one, I think it would be such a service if there was some easy place to go that you had a Q&A that would tell people, who might be eligible. And then if you know it, Liz, but if someone else can also steer someone. We had one question that came in directly to the council, and I was trying to think of who exactly do we send this to? Is this, and the only person I could think of was you, but so if many of us would be more than happy as district counselors, I think, to do one district meeting that's saying, to the extent you do or don't know about this, this is what you could have, and here's where you would go to just, do a quick look, because people don't know that at all, either at all, or they know vaguely, maybe. So I commend you on trying to find a single place you could actually go and find out in layperson's language what you might qualify for. Would be great.
Liz, do you want to talk about the flyer that we're thinking of putting in with the property tax bill this year that addresses some of what Kathy was just describing?
Well, with the tax bill, we're going to hopefully put in what our personal exemption qualification criteria might be and where to go to find those applications and more information. If you would like to find out today about that information, including a link to the tax work-off, it's also on our webpage, but our office facilitates the personal exemptions and things of that nature. We're working on the PACE program as well, so that perhaps we can have that in the future, which would also offer some financing for things. But we try to make it one-stop shopping just on that page. But always, if any citizen is interested in possibly getting help, please send them my way. I will do everything I can to point them in the right direction. And if I don't have the answer, I get back to them really quickly so that I can point them to the right person.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Bob Hegner?
I just had a question. It's on page 77, the service levels, and I'm looking at the tax dollars abated, both in terms of absolute dollars and it's a percent of levy, and it appears to be going up over time. Is that just noise, or is there some trend there that we need to be aware of?
Would you like me to address that?
Yeah, Liz, why don't you weigh in? So Bob, just to confirm, you're talking about the line where it goes from $36,095 in FY19 to $177,419 in FY20.
Right, and it starts at 8,000 in FY16. So
sure, yeah, Liz,
certainly
over time.
Well, it depends on who appeals. Who submits that abatement, and in that particular period, we had a larger appellants and things like that. We had some larger properties. And the other thing that you need to look at is the increase in the mill rate will also impact the tax rate.
Yeah, and the one thing I'll add, I can see why that looks like a trend going up. The one thing I'll say is the way we budget the allowance for abatements and exemptions is, I think it's a percentage of the 1% of the property tax, Sonia, right? Is that correct?
Yes.
And so that is so we have that sort of standard, and we haven't come really close to using that all in a couple of years, maybe longer. We've generally had more than enough in that allowance. So it does look like a trend. I can see why you're looking at that, but overall we're doing very well at keeping the overall level of abatements and really abatements low.
Yeah, and I did ask whether it was just just noise, because I can understand it depends on who appeals and how big the property is and all that. So, okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
So general finance question, this has been a tough year in a way because we've had so many changes and so many unusual things going on in the year that's transpired with grants and different funding sources, different expenditures that were unanticipated. Did you feel, it seems from the outside that our systems were set up, that you guys really pulled it off well. Was there any stresses that in lessons that you learned from this?
Andy, I could share Excel workbooks that would knock your socks off. All right. So, the good thing is we do have a great accounting department. That has very tight controls over things. Everything is in order between Sonia and Holly and the rest of the team. That's never a worry. The hardest part about all of that you just described has been the changing guidance throughout this entire process. I think, there was over 10 eligibility changes in the CARES grants. It was extended obviously by a year. There's things that were eligible in the beginning that are no longer eligible and vice versa. So that's really been the struggle, is trying to keep up with what's eligible, what's not eligible, how do we maximize the use of funds with all these different versions of grants. One thing we did a few months ago, or maybe just over a month ago, is we hired a sort of a dedicated CARES grant manager who's just focused on the grant, not full-time, but part-time, staying up to date and working with staff. And that person's working on CARES, but also on the FEMA side of it. The FEMA applications are very time consuming. You have to enter invoices by line item. And, when you're buying, between the schools and the town, lots of cleaning supplies and PPE and all the things you can imagine, it's a very time consuming process. So I think overall it's gone very well, thanks to the people in the accounting department and the person we hired. But it's been a big challenge to kind of stay on top of it.
I for one just want to thank all of you for staying together and managing our way through what I know must have been an incredible year with just so many new things thrown at us. on all sides. So thank you. Dorothy, you had a question?
It's to do with the auto tax. It might be kind of gimmicky, but you could offer a reduction for electric cars. Have you thought about that?
Are you talking about for motor vehicle excise tax?
Yeah.
I don't think we have control over that, Jen, do we?
No, we don't. I had that question come up from a constituent and went back and read the statute and looked at the all of the Department of Revenue guidance, and the bills, I mean, the whole evaluation system on which it's based is state driven. It's not something we have control over. So, Kathy?
Yeah, I just, it has nothing to do what we're looking at on the books, although I see parking permits issued, and Sean has already told us that he's going to be our parking guru going forward, trying to think of it. But one of the thoughts, and I sent Sean a memo on some thinking about this, I think we could, with a parking permit, give to the extent we had a rational rating system, fee system, which I'm not sure we have, you could give a lower fee for an electric car, because that's completely under our control in the way we do it. So if we wanted to say we'd like clean cars on our streets would be better, but I think we do have that's something that we could think about if it didn't make your work even more complicated on different, now it's just everyone pays the same fee, I think.
Yeah, no, that's a great, that was a great observation. So Jen and I actually walked around yesterday morning. We're trying to walk around sort of the entire downtown from different angles and with the recommendations we've read and information we have from planning, and just kind of start jotting down all the things that we think are possibilities or things we want to bring forward. And then we also had a good conversation with the planning department yesterday as well, because they've lived through a lot of this for the last 10, 15, 20 years. They've been through a lot of studies and reports, and it was really helpful to get their perspective on what we saw, things that they've already seen. And that was one of the things that came up was, we got to look at our whole permit system, because it's been some time since it's sort of had a complete overhaul. Not that we're going to do an overhaul, but since we've really changed anything in a dramatic way. But also within that, do we want to have some sort of way to continue incentivizing EV vehicles, hybrid or fully electric, came up. So I think that's a good suggestion and one that we're looking at.
Mr. Kubiak.
Real quick, the American Planning Association just started a whole series of articles on the $1 billion curbside. So getting the planning department involved in that is a good idea. They make the point that the way we use the curbs, we use curbs right now in a very inefficient way. So there's a lot of different ways to do that. I'd be a little concerned about discounting just electric EV cars, because they're new, they're expensive, and folks who have more modest incomes aren't likely to own one. So that's a problem. And then finally, I really do want to, having seen the municipal finance stuff from multiple perspectives, I really do want to congratulate or thank the finance crew in general for the great work that they've done and continue to do. It's really a thicket of rules, regs, and crazy making stuff, and they've managed to triumph over all of it. So thank you.
Agreed. So anything else people have in the way of questions regarding the finance department?
Andy, I have a couple other little sections that I was gonna go over to general services, debt, and the other assessments in Opeb. Do you want me just to kind of go through those briefly and then see if there's questions on those areas?
Yes, and go ahead.
Okay. So general services. Actually, Sonia, do you want to talk about general services a little bit? That's where our legal line is, but what else goes on in general services?
I love the warning you give me. Right, put me right on the spot. Yeah, so general services, there's two parts to it. There's the 1198, which pays for the audit, and now that's where we moved legal to. I can't think of what other service.
Our liability insurance, I think, is in there as well, right?
Yeah, I don't have it in front of me because I wasn't prepared.
Hey, accounting, if you look at the org chart, it says accounting and then general services.
So accounting's pretty much in charge of that whole operating budget. We do, we take care of the audit, we do the bids for the property and casualty insurance, and so on. The other part, the other 1199 is mostly services and central purchasing. And that's also monitored through we pay for the mail machine, any mailing services out of that account. Like I said, I don't have it in front of me.
Yeah, and the one thing I'll add, Sonia, on the property and casualty insurance, that's something that we're seeing a potentially a large increase. We've got it in the budget, but not so much for what's going on around here, but what's going on around the world. Whether it be hurricanes or floods. We saw a pretty large, we had a big decrease in our property and casualty insurance when we bid it out, and now we're seeing some of the costs start to rise again because of what's going on throughout the country. So that's an area we have to monitor closely. So I'll go to the next two sections and then see if there's questions. So the next section is debt. So that's page 192 in the operating budget. And so debt's sort of a moving target. It's always sort of a point in time. Again, we put this together before we just bid out, before we just did our bond issuance and our ban, which was literally Tuesday and Wednesday that happened. So this will be changed a little bit, hopefully for the better, because of the rates that we just received. And I think the thing to know here is that this budget proposal includes a few debt authorizations. There are some projects within the capital plan. I believe it is a pumper truck for the fire department, a sweeper for public works, and then the chiller for the police station that we're proposing a borrowing authorization. And then there's also the design and project management work for a potential new fire station and DPW building. So I believe those are the 5 that are in the authorizations that are part of this budget. And then the last thing, and then I see there's a question, is other assessments and Opeb. The big things here are the PVTA assessment, charter tuition, retirement assessment from Hampshire County, and other post-employment benefits. For PVTA and charter, there are reimbursements for those. So you'll see the full cost in this section of the budget, but then there's reimbursements on the revenue side. PVTA, we receive offsets from whether it be UMass or Amherst or 5 colleges. And on the pension side, pension is one of those things that we do need to keep an eye on. We had our bond rating affirmed, which was great. There were a couple areas that were sort of identified as areas we could improve. One of them is sort of the combination of our pension and retiree health insurance costs. They're at a certain level that is maybe slightly above what the bond rating agencies would like. And so we cannot, it's hard to make immediate changes in those areas because those are sort of long-term liabilities. But when we think about when we talk about adding positions, benefit levels, all those things sort of play into our long-term liability around those areas. And so it's just things to keep in mind, not that that dictates what the town decides to do, but it can have an impact on our pension assessment or our retiree health insurance costs. And then the other piece there is the Opeb, other post-employment benefits. We did reduce that from 500,000 as a contribution in FY20 down to 250,000 in FY21. And we're proposing bringing that back to 300,000 for FY22. We do want to keep getting that up to where it was, at least to 500,000. That was another area that was identified in the bond rating, is that we do have a plan, but in the opinion of the bond rating agency, I think, and pretty much every other community in the state, they don't view it as a sufficient plan to actually fund the liability anytime soon. And so we need to do some work on that plan and making sure that we can demonstrate that to them in the future.
Sean, can I just add one thing?
Yeah.
We were talking about the capital plan and the borrowing articles.
Yeah.
I just want to mention that there's also the fire station facility design and engineering, as well as the public works facility in that.
Right, both of them. Yeah.
So I just wanted to make sure
Thank you.
that was all out there.
Kathy, did you have questions?
Yeah, well, it's a question and a comment. It's something I asked earlier, and it's on this. It's not insubstantial. So what Sonia just did, it's the schematic design for fire plus DPW is 3.4 million.
Mhm.
And so none of that shows up in the FY22 budget, but what you see in the FY23 budget is a jump in debt service, which is those plus the library plus other things, I realize, of 1.5 million. And what I then went and looked at is what are we allocating for the operating budget increase that year? And it's less than 2% increase. I can't find anything that tells me what you think is going to happen with health insurance, out for FY, we don't do a forecast on it.
Mhm.
But my comment is that we are going to be making a recommendation about the whole budget. We haven't really had a discussion on the implications of what we decide for 22 on what we're going to be facing in FY23, because it's everyone has seen what the discussion has been around a budget that was able to go, operating budget that was able to go up by 2.2%. If we're at 1.9%, and health insurance was negative this year or flat. So we've got step increases built into people. So I'm worried that we are, and you've always said right from the beginning that FY23 was the tough year, Sean, but it's a really tough year. And we're making decisions now that will affect that. So Andy, we had the brief of discussion with this potential way to do all the big projects in a 5-year period. But if we're also then making a decision about the future with this discussion. So I'm looking for carving out a little more time than just looking at this. And I had to, piece together, looking forward, what this year's decision for FY22 will mean for FY23, 24. It looks a little bit better when you get to 24, 25, but not great, so, and I know we're then in the real forecast world, but it has implications for when we talk next Thursday about the CREST program and the community safety. If we want to do anything that's new program, where does the money come from? So it's over in the capital side affects the operating budget side, and you can only see it by sort of jumping around. It's there, it's not hidden. It's just in different parts and different pages.
Kathy, and I just want to ask real quick, did you look at the sort of the 4-year projection on page 44 and 45? Sorry, you're muted.
Yeah, I found the projection that went out multiple years on the
Okay.
revenue side, so I could see both the operating budget and the capital budget and see the jump up in debt service expense, which is because we're making, and you said it's not just, it's also some trucks and other things, the chiller, some other things that are in there.
Yeah, we try to really make that debt projection everything that we potentially might borrow. So yeah, I think the place to look is page 44 and 45. I think the improvement I could make next year, we could make next year in the budget book is maybe put more information about the actual assumptions that are used in those out years, because you can't really tell what we're assuming for some of those different variables around health insurance or things. So we could put some sort of key that shows what the assumptions are in those out years, I think would be helpful. But I think to your point, in FY23, the projection is for a 2%. I think it's roughly a 2% increase in the operating budget, and then going back to 2.5% in 24, 25, and 26. So again, that 23 still could change. We're going to find out a lot this year how quickly we recover. So it could be better, it could be a little bit worse. I don't anticipate it being much worse than the 2%, but we'll see this year when we start, when the college and universities come back.
And I do understand, we're in the crystal ball when we get out. We're already don't know for sure next year, but 2 years from now. But I'm just, as we look at those schematic design, the library's been voted right now, but as we look at schematic design, do we postpone something because we become more insured? And then health insurance, when you look at the employee benefit line, it is so unusual to see no increase. I mean, that's just a gift. That's not what the norm has been. So most of the operating budget then has been salaries, not usually the big hit that's been health insurance, combating with it. So I'm more worried than more worried about 23 than I am about 22. Yeah.
Sure. Yep.
Dorothy?
So I have a question. I was fretting about OPEB expenses and how are we ever going to catch up? And the person I was speaking with said, you're never going to catch up. No one is ever going to catch up on OPEB. It's not possible. I said, well, then what's going to happen? Our employees not going to get their benefits. And the answer I got was, it's going to have to be taken over by the federal government into single payer insurance or whatever. That's where we're going to have to go, because although we are doing a really good job, most other places aren't, and they're going to be crashing and saying they can't do it. So given that as a possibility in the future, is it better or worse to be really prudent as we are, trying very hard to catch up on our OPEB? This is a thought question.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think we're at a roughly 10% funded, which, given the size of the liability and relatively short amount of time that we've been funding it, I think is pretty good. Our plan is, we're really focusing funding, not by choice, but by law. A lot of our additional funding is going towards the pension liability as sort of the number one piece to get fully funded. And that's on track to be fully funded FY 23 or 33 or 34. And once that's fully funded, the expectation is that the assessment we get from the Hampshire County pension system is going to drop by a lot, because a pretty large chunk of our assessment each year is for this past unfunded liability that we're catching up on. And so our town and many other towns, previous finance director here, was part of his plan, is that once we do get that drop in 9 or 10 years in the pension system, is that we would put some of that savings towards getting OPEB fully funded. I don't think we can rely on the federal government taking it over as a strategy. Maybe that would happen. I'm not sure. I know, we're probably better funded than the state is when it comes to other post-employment benefits. But it's something that we do take seriously. It is a liability. The auditors look at it. The bond rating agencies look at it. And I think you're right that we are doing better than many other communities, and we want to kind of keep that ship going in the right direction.
Right. So thank you for reminding me that it really does, no matter what happens, it helps our bond rating, which really helps us all. So thank you.
And the long-term sustainability piece is, our retiree health insurance costs on an annual basis are rising pretty sharply. And if we, the goal is, if you get enough money set aside in this fund, you can help mitigate those annual increases. We're really making investments now for 20 or 30 years down the road. But if we don't make those investments now, 20 or 30 years down the road, things could be in really bad, much, much worse shape than they are now. So that, we're really making an investment in the future and trying to pay our fair share now, so that we don't pass on these really high retiree health insurance costs to future generations.
Okay, anything else? Kathy, did you have something you were?
No, I was just going to say, I can talk to Dorothy directly, since I'm following all the federal things. The interaction with public or private sector on healthcare is not as straightforward as you just talked about it. So it's good that we are paying. You have to understand, we are paying every year for our retiree health insurance. We're just not pre-funding it. And almost no one in the private sector has totally pre-funded their healthcare liability. What they have been doing is cutting back on benefits. And we've got a pretty what I had just heard, we've got a good package that our people are going out with. So I'll just stop there.
Yeah, I think one of the, I've heard this mentioned by others. I think one of the, public sector employees, thinking about municipal employees, don't usually make as much as you can make in the private sector. But one of the areas where you kind of offset it a little bit is with benefits generally being better than in the private sector. So I think it's a give and take on that front.
Todd?
Well, I can just say a little bit of my experience from the private sector, and basically health insurance. I retired. I was one of the last people probably that had what we would consider a good health insurance policy with a PPO. And the people who were hired up, a few years ago, basically just were given a catastrophic health insurance policy, which really doesn't do much for you. The company paid some of the premiums, but I'm telling you, it's even in the private sector, the benefit right now is not getting better, it's getting worse.
And we did, just to round that out, we are also trying to manage the cost side of the equation as well. We did switch to Maya a few years ago, which did make the benefits not as good as they were before, because we introduced things like deductibles and co-pays changed a little bit. So we are also sort of actively managing the cost side in addition to the pre-funding and setting aside money for the future.
Okay, anything else that we want to talk about regarding finance and the whole bundle of issues that have followed in the discussion to Opeb? So if not, we have a number of staff here who've come, and I really appreciate it.
Yep.
Turn it back to Sean to
All right,
where he wants us to go next.
The next department is Human Resources. And our Human Resources Director, Donna Ray, is here to give you an overview of her department.
Hi, everybody.
Hello.
Nice to meet you all, kind of. Maybe someday in person, I hope. So as Sean said, my name's Donna Ray Keneally, and I'm the Director of Human Resources. I've also invited, you'll see our HR manager, Joanne Misiezek, here to attend and see what we're doing here as well. So the Human Resources Human Rights Department is made up of one full-time HR director, one full-time HR manager, and we have a half-time administrative assistant. And HR is responsible for, and I know this is kind of written in the budget book, but I'm just going to give you the overview. So we're responsible for recruitment, hiring, onboarding, some training, employee relations, and administering employee benefits. I am new to the town. I started on October 26th, so finishing up 7 months. It's been very busy. A couple of things that we are working on. So prior to my appointment, the town engaged a municipal HR consultant called Human Resources Services to review our compensation and classification program for our part-time, temporary, and seasonal positions. And we are using that information and their recommendation to implement a new classification plan wage chart for our part-time seasonal positions effective 7/1. We have over 700 part-time, temporary, and seasonal employees that'll be, that were included in that study. We're also in the midst of labor negotiations with the fire department. As you can imagine, I think one of the things that really keeps us busy is the pandemic response. Because of all of the uncertainty related to the pandemic, HR was really, I think, a vital area in terms of serving as both a consultant for leadership and a counselor to employees. We spend a lot of time thinking about how to protect our employees. We work closely with the health director based on Mass public health guidelines, and we've updated many times our standard operating procedures, which are our safety guidelines for on-site staff. We've developed a COVID-related remote work policy. We've updated travel policies and all sorts of stuff like that. That's just kind of ongoing and changing. We've ensured that the EAP is available and talked with our employees about health coverage for a lot of the mental health issues that have arisen or did arise during the pandemic. Just, you know, the uncertainty, the stress of it all, isolation in some cases. So you name it, and it's been developed, reviewed, updated, and changed related to the pandemic. So we've been working on that, and we're happily moving in the right direction with reopening. So you might imagine, and you probably have heard, that recruitment has been challenging because I would imagine probably because of the excellent unemployment benefits provided by the Commonwealth. So we've been thinking of creative ways to attract talent, and our the town's communications manager, Brianna, has been very helpful in helping us to make flyers and recruit to different social media platforms. Let me see. I think it's also important to talk with you about that it's been about a year since George Floyd took his last breath. And so the town, I think a lot of you know, is focused on addressing systemic racism. And to that end, you might be aware that the town became a member of the Government Alliance on Race and Equity. That program's called GARE, and they're a national network of governments that work to achieve racial equity and advance opportunities for everyone. And then in addition, the town formed its own core equity team. And I'm the chair of the core equity team, along with my co-chair, Jennifer Moisten. And I could tell you about the mission and read about the mission to you. But also I do want to let you know that Jennifer recently developed a training. We've also actually talked about worked with consultants about kind of where to go next, and we're in the process of engaging with those consultants. Does anyone have any questions so far? I'm going on.
I'm looking for questions. I don't see anyone yet.
Okay, I'll keep going then. So let me also just quickly tell you that we also work on employee benefits. So we went through a health insurance renewal. As Sean mentioned a little while ago, the town is with Maya, and I think that we use, we get greater discounts through Maya by belonging to this collaboration. And we had a great renewal this year. They actually called it a 1.1% premium increase, but then also gave us a premium holiday, which the employees in town will enjoy in November of 2021, which is for coverage for the month of December. So, and I think that's related to the fact that when the pandemic started, a lot of people stopped going out for healthcare. So there wasn't a huge cost to the insurance companies, I think we've seen. So, and I forget who, maybe Catherine, someone mentioned what's going to happen next year, and I agree. I'm wondering what's going to happen next year. We will see about that. But this for FY22, it was really good. In terms of benefits, the town also offers some voluntary plans so that there's no cost to the town there. It's just, I think, a nice thing for the town to do, use its group buying power to offer things like dental and vision plans to employees if they want. And we're currently working on the life insurance renewal, but I think those are the highlights, and there's a lot of stuff mentioned in the budget book as well.
Kathy?
Yeah, I had a couple questions. I'll start when you said that you were doing a review of compensation for part-time, seasonal, and temporary, and there were over 700 people in that category. When you do that, is that just the town, or are you also looking at schools? So that's 700, or schools and library. Is that,
It's not schools.
Okay.
And that is just, I mean, that's from every temporary, I mean, election workers, our call force for the fire department, every position that essentially is not a full-time position, I would include in that.
Okay. The second one is on health benefits and Maya, do you get to, I think probably the answer is yes, but do you get a report to show you what kinds of reserves they've built up? Because yes, what the COVID did was people stopped going to the doctor and the hospital and electrics. So a lot of electives. So a lot of there's been pressure on large companies, the big insurers, to give back money. So it's really nice that they've given us the holiday. Do we get an accounting? And I realize we're part of a bigger pool to see how much they built up during that time period.
So, well, I mean, we're fully insured, so we do get a lot of information, but I don't recall talking with them about the reserves, but
Yeah,
Paul has his
let
hand
me
up.
oh, go ahead.
Since I worked there previously. So Maya Health and Benefits Trust has about $400 billion in assets. And they're well capitalized and are very careful. They have one partner, Blue Cross Blue Shield, that they work with. They have lots of actuaries that look at their reserve status and things like that. They only insure cities and towns and local government entities. They're the largest insurer. Between the GIC and Maya, those are the two largest insurers of public employees in the state. So they're incredibly conservative in terms of maintaining assets to cover their costs going forward.
And Paul, I didn't mean it that, there was a reserve that was specific to Amherst. I'm just, I'm just saying that the premium flow in, we've had a very unusual year plus where the expenditures plummeted in terms of use of the hospital, use of, getting hip replacements, just along a whole long list going to the doctor. So somewhere in that healthcare world, there's a pot of money, and it looks like the premium holiday was part of the way of giving it back to us. Yeah.
So the Maya board of directors is made up of local officials. It's all managers and HR directors and things like that. That's who makes up the board of directors for Maya, and they're the ones who vote on these types of things. And they're all people like me, and who then say, we've got a lot of money in the bank, we should give a premium holiday type thing.
Okay.
Answer your question.
Oh, Paul, I could have told him that. No, just kidding. Thank you.
And I was looking at the on page 85, the family coverage, individual coverage numbers. And I was just trying to see if there was trends on employees choosing family coverage versus individual coverage, if if they had an option. And of course, family that has with multiple employers usually goes to the best deal. Are we still an employer that is getting a disproportionate share of employees choosing to be covered by us?
I don't know that to be. I mean, I don't think there's been any major changes. I mean, we did the big change that happened was when we went to Maya and we did a full re-enrollment, which means everybody, before if you were enrolled, it just kind of carried over. When we went to Maya, everyone had to re-enroll, and we saw a pretty big change in how many were in family plans versus single plans and how many were in HMOs versus PPOs. And so there were some benefits that way. And some people also took advantage of switching off of the plan for a variety of reasons at that point as well. So it's hard to answer that question. But I know our healthcare coverage benefits are still strong. They're not, compared to other employers in the community. So I think we still have a strong benefit package relative to UMass or other entities.
Dorothy?
This is a question about hiring from within. And I'm reminded of two things. I guess it was the evaluation of the town manager last year. In employee comments, some employees said they don't hire from within. And I know right now HCC is all stirred up because the new president hired a lot of consulting firms, brought in a lot of people from the outside, didn't even notify people who've been with, working for the college for years, that there was a new position, and it, caused a lot of problems. So wanting to know what your provisions for hiring for within and retraining are within the organization.
So I'll start that, and Donna Ray, you can jump on. So under the charter, we're required to post all of our jobs externally, unless it's someone's changing job titles or something like that, and we do that. And I am a firm believer in supporting growth in our own of our own workforce, but we also want to make sure that we're also actively trying to diversify our workforce as well. And we know that we aren't diverse right now. And so that's a piece of it. And that's one of the reasons we do additional outreach. But when, we want to promote, it's how we retain good employees is by providing growth opportunities as well. So it's a fine balance that we follow. Donna Ray, do you want to add anything to that?
No, I think that you're exactly right. I think the charter does say that we do advertise every new permanent position, and so we do that. There is growth opportunity from within. We've just had, in fact, our management assistant in the town clerk's office just became the assistant town clerk, but it was a whole process. And I think that you're exactly right, Paul. The reason is because we are trying to diversify the workforce, and so we do want to, and by the charter, we have to post those positions. So. But I hear you, Dorothy, and I do agree. I like promotion from within. It's a great thing, and it's how we keep our best talent.
I just want to add one thing that I know that some of the feeling at the community colleges might be similar to in town, which is the full-time staff through loyalty see the organization through times of difficulty and trouble, such as we've had this year. And I know that our town, at least from what Paul has reported, our town staff, they have learned new things, worked across in other departments, and have shown a lot of loyalty. And, I understand the need for diversity too, we all do. So maybe you'll have to hire some additional people in order to both do justice to your staff that has been loyal with you and flexible during this time, and to get the diversity which we all agree we need.
I love the way you think. Paul, do you have anything to?
Yeah, any other questions or comments regarding human resources, human rights? Human rights, of course, has become a major activity of its own with all of the demands from that we start thinking about the diversity issues and the community response program and everything else that's coming along. It's a very conscious community about those topics.
Yes. So how'd I do for my first time? All right.
Great.
Good. Okay. All right.
I was just going to say, it's very nice to meet you.
Thank you. It's
Yeah.
very nice to meet you all. And I'm
Yeah,
glad that Paul and Sean are here too to help me when I'm like, oh, what's the answer there?
And I should say to meet both of you, even though Joanne has been notably quiet as we pepper you with questions, but it's great to meet you.
Thank
We
you.
need
all.
we need a town picnic.
Yes.
The workers, we face to face out in the green.
I would love that. Yes.
Donna Ray and Joanne make a tremendous team. We really appreciate their work.
Joanne keeps us all healthy with all of the
Yes,
fruits and vegetables that get put in the
mention that. Yeah.
kitchen.
Can I mention that? So Joanne put in for a wellness grant through Maya, as a matter of fact, and got almost $20,000. And she's got, we have Fitbits, we have they're like this, but they're way better. They're like flasks that say the town of Amherst for water, but also she's getting fresh fruit and healthy snacks delivered to every department. And
what about
and
the council?
We should have. You know what? It's really nice though, because it not only helps with wellness and keeping your minds on healthy eating, but I think it's been great because the employees feel like they've received like a nice appreciation from the town, even though we got it from this Maya grant, but it's just been so great. So I want to thank Joanne for getting that for the town. It's been awesome. Yay.
Yes. I want to add one thing. I was walking up North Pleasant Street in the rain, and a fire captain came running across the street in the rain and said, Paul, I want to tell you, it's so great to get this box of fruit and vegetables because we tend to walk across the CVS and buy candy. And now we have this healthy food there and we know we should be doing it and it's right there. So we don't even leave the station now. We can get the things that we need. And he was just like, everybody on the force really appreciated it. So it's the little things like that. And it's a healthy thing. And everybody wants to live a healthy life, but candy is so prevalent. And so,
And delicious.
and delicious.
Well, now we know there's not a lot of firehouse cooking. Maybe, maybe now that they've got maybe there's a vegetarian chili that'll be on the menu at the firehouse.
Oh, we'll send them some peppers for that chili.
There you go.
That's right. I hope they share it though.
We're out of the Fitbit business. I gather.
And another thing that's
You know
happening.
what that was about?
The which?
I missed it.
That this goes back some years now. That because I think John was still the town manager then. That Human Resources got Fitbits for everybody and was challenging everybody to achieve walking distances. So we had people who would go out and
I would
go
show
out
you
and-
my camera. We just got some more. We're ready to do it again.
And we last or 2 years ago, we competed against Pittsfield, right, Joanne? You organized that? Yeah.
Yes, but we
And-
lost, unfortunately.
Yeah, the steps. But another thing that Joanne and Donna Ray are doing this week is recognizing the first responders. Do you want to talk a little bit about the work you're doing for that?
Sure. It's
Or is it a
no-
secret still?
Well, they don't know yet, but yes. So we're getting some baskets together to bring over to fire and police to in appreciation for everything they do, the various shifts, because we are very grateful to our first responders.
I also want to say I've worked a long time. I started working when I was 17 and I'm 75, so I have quite a history. Looking at you, having the staff respond in these meetings makes me realize what a real sense of camaraderie there is and what real collaboration is. And I am very respectful of you, Paul, but each and every one of you in the department, because I can see the kind of respect that's there. So thank you very much.
Thank you for saying that. I feel that too.
So how should we go, Sean? Going to take your
Yeah, sorry. Thank you, Donna Ray. So the next up is the town clerk, who's going to go through the town clerk's office, registrations, and elections. And I just want to let people know I have to hop off a little before 3 o'clock for a American Rescue Plan webinar update from the state. So you'll see me jump off at that point.
And at that point, we'll be waiting for facilities management.
Yeah, so the two departments left will be the town clerk's office with the sections that Sue does, and then Jeremiah and maybe Rob Mora will be here for facilities to go through the different sections of the budget. So Sue, do you want to give an overview of those three areas?
Sure. I'm glad I came on quick because early because I missed something here. Sean Hannon was supposed to go at 2:45.
Yeah, we switched the order. I won't say why, but we
Okay, that's okay.
But we switched the order.
Okay. All right. Well, hello, everybody. For those, I see if there's anybody that doesn't know me, I'm Sue Audette. I'm the town clerk. I almost said acting town clerk. I'm the town clerk. And I was just listening to Donna Ray talk about the food, and I want to announce that I am the food Nazi around here. With the whole healthy eating, I've gotten on the healthy eating bandwagon, whatever you want to call that, about 4 years ago. So I don't grab candy. I don't grab sugar. I specifically just real whole foods. So anyway, so this is my first time too. I'm not quite sure what is expected, but I just wrote up a little script of what's been going on in our office and what to look forward to in the future. So general government, so the town clerk side of things, as everybody knows, you probably heard this a few times already today or even in the past, that this past fiscal year has been a challenge. Not only were COVID protocols in place, but we held 3 elections in our office, one of which was a very contentious presidential election. And we've had a departmental staffing shortage since September of 2020. So we've been down 2 people instead of 3. All of this has forced us to be especially flexible and creative. Many of the normal services that we provide had to either be put on hold or offered in a different way if possible. We were able to successfully implement an online portal for 2 of our most frequently requested services, which are vital records and dog licenses. That works out great. We've also utilized as many other avenues as possible, such as meeting people outside town hall to receive paperwork or swear them into office, whatever else we can do outside of town hall. Services such as notarizations, passport applications and photos, and the taking of marriage intentions, those had to be put on hold because these are very labor intensive procedures and require a lengthy amount of face-to-face time. As a result, obviously revenues were down from levels in past years due to not being able to provide these services. On a positive note, we have successfully transitioned a new town clerk, me, and assistant town clerk, Amber Martin. And we've also just recently completed the interview process for the management assistant position. We're currently in the negotiating process for that. This will bring us back up to full capacity, and with the opening of town hall shortly, we should be able to get back right away to offering our full complement of services. One of the goals for the upcoming year under the town clerk section of the budget is going to be education on a personal side and on a townwide side. On the personal side, continuing education for the town clerk and assistant town clerk in working towards the certified municipal clerk designation is hopefully going to be happening. And onboarding the new management assistant and getting them up to speed on office procedures will also be a priority. And then on the townwide side, education continues to involve conflict of interest training, open meeting law training, and knowledge of public records law. Now on to elections and registration. So as stated earlier, this past fiscal year, we successfully administered 3 elections, 2 of which happened during COVID times. We also dealt with new state election laws, sometimes on a daily basis, something new, that were implemented to compensate for the pandemic, such as the allowance of a ballot drop box, allowing for early voting by mail, and expanded early voting in person. This resulted in an increase in administrative and supply costs to handle the volume of requested ballots by mail and the need for additional election workers to help with the cleaning and line control at the polls. On a plus side, though, we were reimbursed by the State Auditor's Division for some of these early voting costs, actually in the amount of $24,814, which was nice. The challenges that we faced were met and they were overcome by the outpouring of support from many in the community and town staff, and by the hiring of a 3rd staff person to help specifically with the fall elections. We also applied for and we were awarded a grant by the Center for Tech and Civic Life, which we got in the amount of $34,051 to assist in the expenses incurred as a result of COVID, which was extremely helpful in many, many areas. It allowed for the purchase of multiple supplies that would otherwise have been paid for out of our elections budget, or we just simply wouldn't have purchased. And as stated earlier, the goal of education under elections specifically speaks to voter education. The town charter, section 1010, states that the town implement ranked choice voting in Amherst for town elections, which will require the education of voters in a big way, as this is an entirely new way of voting. This educational campaign will be undertaken early, often, and through multiple media. The impact to our budget will not only be in advertising and personnel costs, but in equipment needed to read the new ballot style. And there is currently a capital request for this new voting equipment in this upcoming fiscal year's budget. We anticipate one upcoming town election on November 2nd. If not subject to COVID protocols at that time, we would not need the increased number of election workers as in this past fall, and could staff each precinct as normal, which is about 6 workers per precinct instead of 8 to 10. Challenges in elections continue to be polling place locations for many reasons, some of which include incompatibility as a polling site, the space is too small, there is insufficient parking, or the site has security issues. In summary, the biggest challenges to our budget are to add back one full-time staff member, the purchase of new voting equipment, and the outreach costs associated with ranked choice voting education. The offset to all this, of course, will be resuming all services, bringing revenue back up to prior COVID levels. So I don't know if I've thrown questions at me. I probably missed a bunch of stuff, but I'm happy to answer anything anyone has.
Looking for Dorothy.
Any clarification on ranked choice voting and whether it will be in place for the November election?
It does not look that way.
No, it's not going to happen. Is that right?
It does not look that way. We've not even been scheduled for a hearing
Okay.
at the State House. And if nothing happens by July 1, there's just no way to implement it. And even then it will be a serious stretch.
I'd like to
Another
add.
question is passport. When will passports
Oh.
be viable? When can you do that again?
Paul, do you want to answer that question? We've decided to take them out of the clerk's office, but we were, I think Paul was going to look into moving them to another department. We have a conflict of interest with doing them in our office to begin with, because federal law changed in 2007, stating that if you are able to issue a birth certificate, you are not able to touch a passport application. So when I first started here in 2005, all three of us were able to be passport acceptance agents, but then that changed in 2007. We had to determine who does the passports and who does the vitals. And because by state law, town clerks and assistant town clerks must issue vital records, we had to pull us two off and leave the management assistant alone on the passport. So it makes it very difficult, you know, when you're trying to offer services. You say, oh, we're here Monday through Friday, 8 to 4:30, and then that person's out on vacation or that person's out for a day. You know, one person has a hard time covering it all. So it stopped when we closed town hall. We actually withdrew from the program. Yeah. So I know there's talk about if we rejoin the program, who is going to offer that in town hall.
As you may know, Athena was our key person on that when she was working in the clerk's office. And, you know, when we closed town hall, it became something we couldn't support. And we have to look at this carefully because I think, Sue, it was always an issue for the clerk's office to be able to accommodate it. It's a service. We don't have to provide it. The post office also provides it. But I think our experience has been that when we ran it, people loved coming to town hall because we gave them good service and we're available and responsive to them. So we'll look at that again because I think it's a good thing to offer to our residents and other people who come here. But we just have to be able to staff it and figure out if it's going to be all the time or just under certain hours and things like that. And we have to have a backup person too. That's Athena knows more about the details of this.
I want to add one reason. You're going to need more passports because everybody has to get that real license. But for someone like me who has married, widowed, whatever, I have a lot of names. They said, if I can't come up with papers for everything that I did in my life, that the way to do it is to renew my passport. Then I can go get the real license, the real ID. So there are going to be a lot of other people in my situation who are going to want to get a new passport.
Yeah. And if it's a renewal, Dorothy, if you can just renew it, you don't need an agent. You just do it by mail.
I let it lapse.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Kathy?
Ranked choice voting. And when you said you're going to be out early and often, so 2022 will be the first time? No, we won't, there's no local. So you've got a big time. You've got time. Okay.
Yes, 2 years.
So I was going to ask just adequacy of staffing and early and often, and we can all watch what's going to happen in New York City when they've got the number of candidates they've got up for mayor, plus they've got all the other pieces. So we can, yeah. Okay. So it's not going to be a huge drain on your time in terms of getting it up and ready. That's good.
No, not a short, no. In fact, at the end of April, I was part of the East Hamptons demonstration of the voting equipment, which is the same voting equipment we'll get. So I got to watch all morning long how it works with the software, with the hardware. I got to put ballots through the machine. So I've got a hands-on, you know, knowledge of it now. Yeah, and the new tabulators aren't that much different than our old tabulators. It's the software that's the biggest change. Yeah.
So I also just wanted, we've been doing thank you notes for people as they come. I had to do a vital record for my mom, and then I had to redo my dog license. And your team is great because little things like I'm supposed to send in a stamped envelope so you can mail me back the dog license. Someone knows that I forgot to put the envelope in, and it's sitting on their desk. It's just, the level of personal service is pretty extraordinary. So thank you.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. We try.
So on ranked choice voting, we have the equipment that are we going ahead with buying the equipment even if we did, though it appears we're not going to be able to do ranked choice voting for our next round of municipal election? Is there any other changes that come with the new equipment, or will it read ballots that are in the format that that everyone's used to?
It's able to read the old ballots. It's going to read the new ballots as well. Also, I believe it's in the capital budget, so it is on, in line for proceeding. But from the time that I got the quote on the equipment and the availability to putting together my responses here for the budget first meeting at JCPC, actually probably after that, we found out that there's a waiting list on this equipment now. So as you know, with COVID and parts from China, these tabulators are assembled in the US, but with parts from China. So the vendor is having a hard time getting the parts. So he's got a waiting list. They had a whole bunch of equipment, they sold them all out, and now there's a waiting list. So even if, I don't know what the timeline is at this point with COVID lightning and things coming back to normal, maybe that won't be a problem when we're ready to purchase them. But as of actually, I found this out at the end of April when I'm remembering now, I was at the demonstration in East Hampton. That's when he told me. So end of April. Yeah. I think we had gotten the quote in February though.
And then my other election question is that we went through quite a back and forth last year about location and numbers of voting places. And in addition to that, we did a lot with mail-in voting that we didn't do, which reduced the number of people who needed to vote at precincts. And I also recognize that we had challenges with COVID in just making sure that we had enough people who could work as election workers. And putting all of those things together, do you have any recommendations for the council as things that we should reconsider on these issues of the number and location of voting sites?
Well, I can tell you precinct 2, the North Fire Station really does not want us there. It's a fire station. It's always been an issue. And we always have pushback with the schools. I think this is an ongoing area that we need to come to some kind of resolution on. The voting by mail is going to be over and done with at the end of June. So we're going to go back to normal times on how people can get their ballots. So it's back to just absentee or in person for town elections. So I think that's going to bring the numbers back out into the precincts. From what I heard, you all must have, you may have heard more than me, but I didn't get any complaints at all on the high school on election day. We had none. People were just, the usual phone calls like, where do I go to vote again? We'd tell them, and then so the high school is definitely a viable option for permanency. Number of polling places in there is, I don't know. We'd have to, I think one of the issues with that location is electrical plugs. Where do you plug in the tabulators? But there are quite a few precincts. Precinct 1, no parking. We've always had this issue. I really don't know what the solutions are. There's always pushback with voters because they like their little neighborhood precincts, but it comes to a point where, if the location doesn't want you there, then you do have to find some other location. I hope that answers your question. I'm
Yeah,
not,
no,
you know,
it's
yeah.
helpful. I mean,
Okay.
it's an ongoing conversation, and it
Yeah.
seems like we need to be thinking about it in the process that works with you to try and address it proactively and not wait until the end. Lynn, do you have some thoughts on it or other subject?
Can I jump in there, Andy?
Yeah.
So the two previous town clerks, Margaret and Shavina, both had the idea of a centralized polling location, which many communities do. And that's where the proposal for the consolidated location at the high school came into play. And that was, I think you got a lot of negative feedback on that and made a decision like we can do that for some, but not all, because there are different values in play and you don't want to disenfranchise folks. And that was the sense of that. So I think that's one solution, but otherwise we're going to be trying to find locations, and there aren't many available other than schools, and there aren't many public buildings available right now.
Yeah, I mean, it strikes me that it's going to cause us not to necessarily go back to the further discussion of just one location, but on the other hand, whether we can maintain the number of locations and have to be creative about thinking of new locations, new options, like what do we do with back at the fire station doesn't really want us? Is there another option that's available to us?
I know that in the past, we asked permission from Emmanuel Lutheran Church to put 2 polling places in there, and they were agreeable. So if precinct 2 had to be moved, it could move over to precinct 3. It's not that far away. That's one solution for one little problem. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know if the university would be willing to allow us to use space in any building that has parking, like its own police facility, for example.
Yeah.
The community room they have there. So, Lynn, did you have other things that you wanted to raise?
I just want to say that I actually made it a point to go visit polling sites on election day, and I saw no problems at all at the high school. However, I just don't want to go through what we went through last August. If it weren't for Kathy working side by side with me to rewrite an entire plan for polls, we would have been up a creek. And one of the things, just to lay out a sense of calendar, we don't have a primary this year. There is only a general election, and it will most likely not be ranked choice voting. And then the next year is the state election. And by then we will have gone through redistricting, which means there may be some changes to polling places anyway. So that is a roundabout way of saying Sue has her plate full to make sure we get through, because then in 2023, we implement ranked choice voting. So the next 3 years are really very different election lands, if you will, for Amherst. And if we have to change voting locations because of redistricting and re-precincting, then there's a lot of education that has to come our way for that too. So Thank you, Sue, for everything you're up to. And some.
Yes, and some. You're welcome. Thank you for the clarification.
And Dorothy?
Yeah, real quick. Voting by mail as we had it, we don't control it. It's state controlled.
Correct.
Fine. That answers my question. Thank you.
Okay.
Anything else? What did you do with marriage intentions if
I feel bad about that.
people to get married,
there are a couple of towns locally that are taking appointments. I know Belchertown is, but they're only doing it for their residents. there's all these conditions. So we're just telling people, start calling around, seeing who will take your intentions. But it takes about 15 to 20 minutes, depending on the couple, to fill out the paperwork.
Well, they could just live in sin. That wouldn't be too.
It's just, I've had personal people asking if I would marry them, and then, okay, and then can we file our intentions with you? I'm like, yes, no. I feel bad. But yeah, I'm with the opening up, and we'll figure out how to do it. It was always just tough here, because what do you do? Stop what you're doing for half an hour, maybe go downstairs and just sit and wait while people, because the forms can't leave the building. There are all these requirements around it. They can't take them home and then bring them back. So it just was what it was. And luckily we're at the other end here now. And Pat, I have to tell you, I've been working since I was 13. My first job was cutting onions in a snack bar to make onion rings.
Oh, I love it.
Worst job ever.
We'll get together for coffee when COVID's over, and I'll tell you my worst one.
Okay, sounds good.
So anything else, looking for the committee list, see if anybody else has any other questions that they were in the end. I know it's been a challenging year in in probably every respect for you, and I really appreciate, and on behalf of the entire council, and say how glad we were to have you come on board as our clerk. And I think that the way you've managed us through these crises has proven that that's right. So
thank you very much. Thank you. And Amber too. Amber deserves just as much praise. She's like my second in command. Yes, a really strong second in command.
And since she's not on the call, please convey our appreciation to her also.
I will, absolutely.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
And Jeremiah is here, and he can tell us all about anything that he's observed about polling locations, since did a lot of work on getting us there. Question we had asked was, Jeremiah was, I think you might have not come on board yet, but whether there were any observations about where we ended up with in the voting locations, and whether there anything that we learned from that we would want to consider as we're going forward.
Well, yeah, I should have mentioned the entire the maintenance staff. They were phenomenal in all of this, and DPW. But he pulled together so many things and set things up. It was amazing. And I think, well, the biggest glitch that we found with the high school was, we all went in there and checked out the space. It's plenty big, but then it was like, okay, where are the plugs? And they were way up in the ceiling, like 30 feet up. And so, okay, we can't exactly reach that to plug in tabulators. There were only a few around the edges. So that was a hurdle to overcome. But I think the biggest thing was the porta potties. That's learning going forward. No porta potties. Nobody liked the porta potties. We had so many complaints from our workers. But the thing is, there he is. They couldn't use the bathrooms in the facilities, so it was the only other solution. I'll let it over to you, Jeremiah.
Yeah, I did hear a little bit of that, and I would have to say, it was most certainly a challenging election, navigating all the safety protocols due to the pandemic. On the backside of that, I really do see a benefit of having that central location. With each of the facilities that we do have for the polling locations, some of them I believe lend themselves well, and then there are others that are quite challenging. And I think that if we could somehow utilize that single location, and everyone is comfortable doing so, I think that would be a great benefit. There is some of the facilities I would almost have zero vehicle traffic. It's extremely hard or extremely difficult to place vehicles. So driving up, they work well for foot traffic, but driving up, it just doesn't work. And then there are others areas that have great parking and that are very expansive, but then those facilities are a little bit more remote for the foot traffic. So if we could bring all of those together, I see the high school as being a benefit. It has sort of both. It has, you know, the public transportation, you know, it's fairly centrally located, and we do have a lot of parking. Perhaps I just think that maybe the conversation should continue with that. I see benefits to it. It was challenging with the elections, but it was also a lot of fun. I enjoyed it.
I'm glad you had some fun with it. Sue, actually, can we have a system where people can, now that we're not using just paper books, but we're into the age of technology, can people choose a location to go to, or does state law still require that people vote in person only at the precinct that they are registered at?
Yeah, no, only at the precinct they're registered at. Yeah.
So that would require state law change to take advantage of technology and look and solve some of the problem that way.
Yeah, no, there's still very old-fashioned laws on the books.
I was wondering if any advocacy with the legislature. I'm afraid the Secretary of the Commonwealth may be less flexible in the legislature on this one.
Well, I do know that Galvin is trying for early voting to be a permanent thing. So if that, you know, not early voting, I'm sorry, mail-in voting, mail-in ballots. So if that were to pass and it became permanent for all elections, that, you know, right there helps out a lot for people who can't get to their polling places or what have you. We'll see what happens. He's fighting, but hasn't passed yet.
Yeah, but that requirement that you have to vote at the specific precinct does limit option, is another way of limiting voter options.
Well, right, if you want to vote in person, right, you still have to stay with your precinct. But if you have the option of not having to go out to your precinct, you could vote by mail.
Yeah, and the early voting gave us a second location for everybody. Any other questions? Pat, you had your hand up.
Yeah, I stepped away for a moment to get some water, so I might have missed this, but when we talk about having one polling place, what that impacts people without transportation, without personal transportation very directly. And so how would you be addressing that?
I know the bus route is only, it's a quarter of a mile away. I think that was already looked at. We had talked about trolleys, you know, that would be something we could further discuss, though, if there are any kind of van pools that could be put in place, that sort of thing, even school buses.
Yeah, because it seems to me that if there's only one polling place, it impacts people very differently, which is a kind of, it can be a real block to voting. So it would have to be considered and have to be implemented, I think.
But currently, the polling locations are not within walking distance of a large part of the population. If you happen to live near where your polling place is, you're lucky, but most people are some distance.
I think right now, people, depending on where you live and what is, you know, if you live like Applewood, I know Applewood has vans, that sort of thing for their population. I know most people just rely on their own cars, but if you don't have that, call a friend. If you don't have that, I know this is always an issue everywhere, not just here.
Right, and it would directly impact people with low-income people who are reliant on public transportation from areas like the Boulders and South Point and stuff like that. So if we're going to do that, we have to provide something to make the voting fair. You know, it can take several hours to do something by our public transportation system. And there's, you know, so it's just something to seriously consider.
And let me go on. Bernie?
Yeah, I think hopefully the advocacy around mail-in voting and early voting will continue, and we'll get somewhere with that, because going to a single polling place, which we did in Belchertown, Sue will appreciate the design of the middle school in Belchertown, because it was designed deliberately to use the gymnasium as a polling place, so you can close off everything around it. And I guess there are enough plugs. But you know, we're going to inconvenience people if we, no matter what we do in terms of how we vote. So we really need to find something that's optimal for people. And I you know, I would encourage all of us to talk to our reps and senators about making voting easier.
Making better public transportation.
Well, yeah, well, we're so, don't get me started on the public transportation. I mean, I live a half a mile away from a bus stop that I can't depend on.
Right.
So, you know, because the transportation is tied into the university and the
Right.
5 colleges. So,
Exactly.
anyway, but you know, if we do go to a single point to a single polling place, I think it'd be incumbent on us to try to find some way of getting people there who want to vote in person, and hopefully that mail-in voting will make life easier for all of us.
Dorothy?
I want to just clarify the way the voting is done. I haven't paid attention lately, but when I used to go in, the reason that you have to go to your polling place is that there's a book, and the book is for the people, for the blocks that are in that place. In the book, there would be cards or that had your name and address on it. Or do you use that, or do you use printed lists?
So it's a printed list from the voter registration system. It's the voter list. We print them out by precinct. They
Right.
go into a binder. It's by street name and then alpha within well, by number and then alpha. So, you know, you'd approach the check-in table. You'd say, I live on Allen Street, number 24, and my name is, and then boom, Allen 24. There you are. Check if you're active. So yeah, it's the voter list is what we print.
So that could in fact be at all the polling places if you needed it.
They have to be. It is already.
Okay, but one reason I would think you might need to vote at your own dedicated polling place is it is partly a making sure that somebody doesn't vote twice, you know, hitting all the polling places, which theoretically could be caught. Or if everything is electronic, but I have to say, I'm not in favor of everything being electronic, because people are they're losing confidence that that's safe. So that you do the printed out voting sheet. So that should work. So then the last thing is a suggestion on the new school that will be built. Perhaps what Bernie mentioned, that when they do the gymnasium, they do think of it as a possible polling place and include the plugs, the whatever that would be required, and the bathroom and the ability to shut it off from the rest of the school, so you're not compromising student security.
Okay. No, that's a good suggestion. We'll pass it along to the chair of the school building committee. So Jeremiah, there's nothing else on elections, then I really do want to thank Sue and make it official that we're not going to talk about elections and guys' facilities and move on.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you all.
So turning on to facilities maintenance, any introductory piece that you want to give first?
Sure. I'll just do a brief overview. First off, my name is Jeremiah LaPlante. I'm the facilities and maintenance manager for the town. I supervise and coordinate all of the maintenance and custodial work for many of the town buildings. Those buildings include the town hall, police department, Banks Community Center, Boltwood Walk, parking garage, East Street School, South Amherst campus, Amherst Child Care, North Amherst campus, and Munson Memorial Library. But I would say my assistance also goes beyond those buildings. I often communicate and collaborate with the libraries and with the schools as well, as we saw in the elections. So I coordinate preventive, predictive, and corrective actions for all of these various sites, just ensuring that the buildings are looked at, they are cleaned, they're in good repair, and then the grounds are obviously taken care of as well for all weather conditions. I maintain records of the equipment, the building, and the assets, and use those for short-term and long-term improvements. Some of the work that I've done, or a lot of the work that I've done over the past year, has been COVID related, as that has really impacted much of our lives. One of those areas was the elections that we were just discussing, and others was just general safety. Ensuring that all of our town's municipal employees, as well as the public, are safe in each one of those buildings. So just working, collaborating with the individuals who work in each of those locations, setting up sanitation stations, various barriers, just all of those protocols, just to make sure that we are following the guidance and keeping everyone safe.
Let me see if there are any questions or comments from the committee. Start with Kathy.
Unmute. On the buildings, I had a question about, I think when you're talking about the North Amherst campus, that's the old school up here across from the library?
South Amherst campus, correct, yes.
No, but what about North Amherst? What is
North Amherst School? Yes, across from the North Amherst Library, yes.
Okay, so my question about that is, and this is probably of the two of you with Paul, we rent, for a while we were renting out that whole top floor. There was Head Start, and then UMass had a piece of it that they were supporting. But my understanding is at least the UMass piece was through a parent granting community service thing where they had the space. So with that part closed down, are you actually in and out of that building? How are we using that building right now? Do you do maintenance there? How does it work with a tenant? And I know we've got Head Start, then downstairs we've got WIC. So just some, and then my other question is with the hopefully fairly soon expansion of the North Amherst Library, which is a town building, and with a community space, will your team be part of taking care of that building, that North Amherst Library, at least the structural sides of it? So those two pieces. I mean, I understand the other town buildings, so I just want to know those two.
Sure. So North Amherst School right now is being used by the Head Start and Reach program. That's a portion of the top level. Community Action, WIC, is using the office space at the ground level. And then the remaining area of the ground level is used by the town for document storage. As you said, the UMass tenant, I believe is heading out, and Paul might be able to answer this better, but in my interactions with individuals from Head Start, it sounded as if they were looking to grow their area and take up that whole first floor. Through this pandemic, it has been in large empty, vacated. I make it a point to go through every one of the buildings weekly, if not more. For one, I know that there are children that would typically be in that building. So it's important to me to make sure that the water systems are up to par. So I do weekly flushing of all the water systems throughout the building, because I really don't know when they'll be back. So I really want to be sure that the water is safe. There's no stagnation. That also helps me. I'm able to put eyes on all of the equipment, the major equipment in there, the HVAC, electrical, really just to keep an eye on the building. Because I'm sort of the steward of these places. So I want to put eyes on it, and I will go from the basement right to the attic and have a look. So at least minimum weekly, sometimes more often.
And then the North Amherst Library, I know some of what the work that's being done is repair of the building as well as the renovation. So, and part of, you had a request on roof, but is that also under you, or is that just one that sort of sits out there as an orphan? It's not, it's not, I mean, the Jones Library says, the building is the town, the
right.
The staff is the library, but it wasn't listed under the buildings and Munson was, so it's my question.
For this one, I would think that maybe I should look for a little bit more clarification. I know it is a town building, but at this point, I believe the Jones staff assists with that building. But you are correct. It's a town building, and the Jones Library essentially occupies the building. But they've also been supporting that building with cleaning and maintenance.
Okay. So to the extent there was a maintenance need, in the past, at least, they would have come, if it was at a capital level, they would have been the group that would bring the capital request. I mean, the more recent one, there's a series of repairs going on. So I'm just, I love it that you're doing all these buildings, and in paying, and just so people know, on JCPC, one of the things Jeremiah was talking about with a capital fund that he has is worrying about the exterior of all the buildings so that water's not getting through. So it's not just, boilers and chillers. I think it's fabulous that we have someone that is thinking inside, outside, and as you just said, even water systems. It's fantastic.
Yeah.
So that was why I was wondering if this one, orphan's not quite the right word, but it's anyone, it's going to, when it's rebuilt and expanded, it will have a bathroom. It will have a community room. And yeah, so. Okay, that you answered my question.
Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, there is a issue that somebody's going to have to deal with, but I think it's really not in the council's role necessarily to be the ones. The community room needs to be managed when it's not being used by library functions. The question will be, how does it get utilized and managed? And Paul?
Yeah, so the library director and I have had those conversations. The library won't be scheduling the community room. They'll be present, obviously, but we manage the Munson Library, the Munson Memorial Building now, and we'd probably we're looking at doing the same thing. Plus, we're looking at doing as much electronic sort of access control as we can in the new addition, so that it doesn't have to, you don't have to have a key to get in and things like that. So as much as we can do it with 21st century technology, but it will be an expanded responsibility for the facilities department.
Thank you.
Lynn, do you have something?
Your hand is up.
Yeah. So the answer is, so are there other questions? Yeah, go ahead.
I have one. I mean, I know we're supposed to only be focusing on FY22, but Jeremiah's skills in terms of looking at all these buildings, I'm assuming you're not also over in our school buildings, but I think you were starting to look at the on the capital side for fire. If and when we hopefully are building a new school and one of them becomes vacant, would Jeremiah be part of the team that was thinking of potential reuses or alternative uses, including when we're saying, what could the space be used for? And Paul, if there's staff expansions, there are functions that right now we don't even have the space for that we might want. Because that kind of assessment would be look at it not as an elementary school, but looking at it as, okay, now it's a building. And the open classroom might not be a problem if you're using it for something else. So that's my sort of who's part of a team that's starting to think of it as a capital resource and what its short-term and long-term maintenance needs or renovation needs might be.
Right. So a very good question. So if we have an excess building, we have a property committee, a committee that can review that. But a major property like a elementary school is a pretty big conversation to have at the town council level. But you'd want a reuse committee or somebody who's looking at what do you want to use? Do you want to sell it? Do you want to use it for something else? And I think if you're going to use it for something else, the facilities manager is key because they're the ones who are going to be maintaining it and they have the inside scoop. That's why we have Rupert on the elementary school building committee. When you start designing something, you want to know from the people who are doing the work, what's it going to take to maintain. So yes, Jeremiah brings such a broad set of skills. We're just really fortunate to have him. So we keep piling more things on him, whether he likes it or not.
Thank you. No, that's what, Paul, you did see me trying to start to grab Jeremiah there as we're not waiting to think about it 4 years from now, but thinking about it over the next several years. Yeah, thank you.
And I guess the other question that I would have, only because I'm sort of anticipating what areas of interest other members of the council would have, at some point, we're going to have an energy plan. And when the energy plan is in place, it's probably going to want us to move in certain directions, and what steps we can sort of anticipate coming up in the structure administratively to get us there and financially to get us there.
Yeah, so I don't think we want Jeremiah to get into the nitty gritty detail he did with JCPC about BTUs and everything like that. But one of the reasons in the budget was to create a fund that was available so that he could be opportunistic about, and with working with Stephanie Ciccarello about getting outside funding to do energy efficient things. Do you want to give an example or two of that, Jeremiah? Do you have something like that?
Yeah, and we could say that just looking at Munson and the recent conversations we've had with replacing the HVAC system over there, I would say that I use that as my guide when I'm approaching some of these different projects, that to think about the energy conservation and sustainability. And now with that wonderful ADA report that we have, just using both of those as a guide when thinking about any of these projects. So it's gone as far as looking at replacing some of the flooring at Munson and reaching out to Stephanie and saying, from a sustainability perspective, what could I do? I just want to ensure that I'm always pushing to reach those goals, because they are achievable, but they are also lofty. So I think it's important to have that written in front of me at all times while assessing the buildings.
As far as getting solar on roofs of buildings or parking lots, we're looking for some opportunities.
And one example of that would be the Amherst Police Department. So working with Sean about different capital projects, kind of shifting some things around. I needed to move the chiller up front a little bit more than the roof, but when we get to that roof, absolutely, I would love to see solar on that roof, and that's going to help offset some of the increases that we have in our energy or electrical expenses. But there are other opportunities, and I think that the town is looking into some bigger energy opportunities. So Bangs is a good roof. Bangs is nice and flat. The buildings surrounding Bangs also have solar. So these are things that we definitely need to look at in the future.
So looking to the committee, anybody else have questions?
Other than saying we're glad to have you, Jeremiah.
I'm glad to be here.
But I don't want to hold you any longer. If there's nobody else who wants to, there's a question they want to pose. I thought your budget, I really appreciated how the information that was provided. It's very helpful. And I know you worked with Sean to make sure that the information is available. So thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Very, very thorough and helpful. So anything else? If not, then appreciate you having been with us, and you're welcome to stay, but I understand you have other things to get to.
I'm going asparagus picking, so.
Oh.
Thank you very much. Have a good night. Thank you.
Good night. Okay, gang. So I think that where we are at as a committee is we're getting near the end of the process. I just want to remind everybody to keep up. I'm trying to keep up with the sections in the part that I've been assigned to, and it's been hard. So I appreciate that it's been hard on the rest of you, but if we want to try and get reports to the council as they are available to us to do that, it'll make our final process so much easier, because we won't have to go into detailed reports about departmental discussions. And Lynn, you have your hand up, so see what you have.
So I just want to make sure that, so I wrote up my report on the elementary schools. Is that all you need from me?
I think so, because what we're going to do in the end is that we're going to vote on whether we have recommendations to support the budget as proposed, or whether we have recommendations to the council to take other action. And what I'm looking for is to make sure that when we get to that stage, which is going to be under a very tight timeline, that we don't have to go back and write up descriptions of departmental presentations. So I think the answer is yes, because if there's anything that comes out of the discussion in the last section that I described, what gets written up there is going to flow from that meeting and that conversation. So I think that if everybody.
Andy, just a little bit more on the report, because I'm feeling that I had fire and it was pretty straightforward. Should I talk about some of the challenges they put forward in terms of maintenance and things like that are in the budget? Or so I'm a little unsure of what I should be focusing on. I can talk to you separately if that's helpful.
Yeah, no, it's a fair question to ask, and I think it's probably worth talking about as a group. By the way, there's been no public attendees most of the day, so that's why I haven't done anything about public comment. I think why I really pushed to get the first one out and did several departments and community services, and Lynn did one and did the elementary schools one, and it was in the first report that was sent to the council. And it gave her sort of a range, because I think that Lynn dug a little deeper and did a little bit of her own research. I think it was in enrollment trends, if I recall.
Yeah, I just added the enrollment trends and Kathy directed me to the pages. And what I did in mine was focus on the discussion that was more, not the presentation, but
Gotcha.
So
discussion.
it was really the questions, and
Yeah, gotcha.
to the extent that there were written questions and responses to written questions, as there was extensively and for several of the different departments, DPW. I think that document in of itself could form the basis of the report. What we want to do is, though, make sure that it's in a format that is easy to consume by whoever, whether it be a counselor or the public, because this is our opportunity, Finance Committee, to say what we heard regarding each of the departments. But I don't think that we need to repeat what was in a very comprehensive document. I think a lot of the work was done. So when I did sections like the senior center, I certainly went back and looked at the budget book, but tried to think about the topics that came up during the conversation.
Right. Okay, that's good. Thank you.
Andy, I thought I saw Rob Moore come and go. Were we going to be talking to him today, or was that just him coming into the wrong meeting? There was a Rob Moore that came on and off.
Yeah, he supervises Jeremiah, so he was there for support.
Okay, thanks. All right.
Yeah, there was no budget section specific.
Okay, fine. I just didn't know whether we had someone in the room.
And we have a biggie coming up when we do planning, conservation, development, because he will be back then.
So are you going to hold the next version? So, well, what's my deadline? Because I have not written up police. Would you?
The deadline I have.
So Pat and I have fire. I have police. She has fire. I have police. Bob's got the biggie. So when would you like those paragraph to 2 paragraphs, whatever we're planning on writing up, is question number 1. And question number 2, we did the Q&As and Sean has posted them. Are you thinking of attaching them to the write-up so that to the extent people don't go and look, so some of the original questions were answered in what Sean collected, and then we don't have to write those. That was part of the conversation. So I have that 2-part question.
Let me ask your opinion collectively about that, because there's 2 ways to handle that. One is to attach it to the physical document, and the other is just to put links into the physical document to get people there. Is your preference? Lynn?
I like links.
I vote for links. They just spent an enormous amount of time creating a budget document with links in it. Let's utilize it.
So what you would want to do is, if there's something that you think is important, or you could just say that the number of questions were asked and information is provided to the committee and it's available at this line, and then do it as a link.
You're looking for a fairly brief report from us.
Yeah, I think that brief, and that's why I say, if you don't have that one, I'm trying to remember which date it was, where we had schools and 2 of the community services departments, recreation and senior services. It kind of gives you a model. I did it early so that you'd have at least some context to place it in. And Dorothy has done one in the library, but I was waiting to have a grouping to put it in. And as far as the date is concerned, it's too late for next Monday. We're not going to get a finance committee report that's going to have a comprehensive section with a number of things. So it's probably middle of next week.
Okay.
We really, or early next week, as early in next week as you can possibly do it. And that would give us time to get it in. And if we have to do an additional report to the council that is sent by email and then put into the packet of the next meeting for the public, that's another option. So if we have to do multiple reports, we will, but let's just try and get them moving. And I appreciate it. So I think that the only other thing that I'll just mention real quickly so we can be done is on schedule. We know we have 2 meetings on the 27th. Just to be aware that there are those 2 meetings, and I'll try and get through the first one as quickly as we can, so that there's some reasonable time in between, because the community service working group will be with us later. I think that the complexity that we have is that if we also need to come back to a discussion, which we do, about how to permanently fund reparations, we may have to add that to the first meeting on the 27th. And that will put a little bit more stress on the situation.
So
Yes.
I have one suggestion, and not for Bob, Bernie, Jane, to the extent you want to spend a little extra time on what we're going to see on the 27th, that discussion, that will be presented to the council Monday night. Am I correct, Lynn? You know, so you would at least get a flavor, not so Paul sent you, you got the document, but you'd hear the initial questions people have. And because they've in addition to a reporting on what they've done, they've provided a potential, this is what the whole new staffing could look like, and the price tag on it. So if you wanted to hear them talk about it, that's Monday night. So
We can also provide you the link, but my estimation, which is, as always, quite optimistic, that you could be at around 7:30. Stop laughing.
Always a guess. Okay, anything else? I have no anticipated business. Let me just check to see. We do have one attendee now.
That's Jane. She's joined by phone.
Okay. So so we have no public comment, and nobody's come up with any additional unanticipated business. So I will then treat us as adjourned.
Thank you.
Thank
Wake up,
you.
Sonia.
Good night, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.